Tonight, we're uncovering the dark truth about ancient magic at Hogwarts. This is a fascinating topic, but I'll keep my narration calm to ensure you can still drift off to sleep. Thank you to those of you who've been joining us consistently. If you're falling asleep with us tonight, let me know in the comments how many nights in a row you've been here. And if this is your first night, just comment night 1. Now back to the video. Imagine walking through the stone corridors of Hogwarts in the dead of night. The torches flicker low, casting long, dancing shadows against the portraits of witches and wizards who have been dead for centuries. To most students, the castle is a place of learning, of predictable charms and carefully measured potions. But beneath the floorboards, behind the moving staircases, and woven into the very foundations of the school, there is something else. Something far older than the 4 founders. Something that doesn't obey the laws of modern wandwork. We often think of magic as a tool, a skill to be mastered through Latin incantations and precise wrist movements. But the lore of the wizarding world hints at a power that is not a tool, but a living, breathing force of nature. This is ancient magic. It is the raw, unrefined energy of the universe itself, and it is far more dangerous than any unforgivable curse. What if the magic in the Harry Potter films and books is just the surface of a deep, dark ocean? For generations, the Ministry of Magic and the professors at Hogwarts have taught a sanitized, controlled version of magic. They teach students how to light a wand or levitate a feather, but there is a reason why certain areas of the world are forbidden, and why some secrets are buried so deep they have been forgotten by almost everyone. Ancient magic is not just a stronger version of a stunning spell. It is a primordial power that predates the invention of wands. It is a magic that responds to the soul, to the environment, and to the fundamental fabric of reality. It doesn't need a wizard to exist. It simply is. And for those few who can see it, it appears as a haunting, swirling blue mist. A ghostly reminder that the world is much older and much stranger than we were ever led to believe. The stakes of understanding this power are higher than most realize. When we look at the history of the late 19th century, a world on the brink of a magical revolution, or perhaps a magical collapse, the ability to perceive and harness these ancient traces is a gift, but it is also a heavy burden. It is a power that can mend the world or tear it apart at the seams. It is tied to the most intense human experiences, the agony of loss, the weight of a life-altering sacrifice, and the raw, unfiltered emotions that modern spells try to contain. This is the magic that protected a baby in a cradle in Godric's Hollow, and it is the same magic that built the impossible architecture of Hogwarts itself. But with that power comes a dark resonance. Every time this magic is used, it leaves a trace, a footprint in the snow of time, and those traces have a way of festering. As we journey into the shadows of the Scottish Highlands and deep into the vaults beneath the school, we have to ask ourselves, why was this knowledge suppressed? Why did the keepers of this magic go to such lengths to ensure it remained hidden from the wider wizarding world? Perhaps it's because ancient magic isn't meant to be controlled. Perhaps it's because the more we tap into the fundamental forces of the world, the more we lose our own humanity. There is a thin line between a protector and a tyrant, and when you wield the power of the earth and the stars, that line begins to blur. Tonight, we are going to look past the velvet curtains of the Great Hall. We are going to ignore the comfort of the common rooms and step into the cold, silent places where the whispers of the past still echo. We will explore how this magic differs from the spells we know, why it was coveted by both goblins and wizards, and the terrifying price that must be paid by those who seek to master the primordial. We are descending into the heart of the mystery, where the blue light of the ancient world still flickers in the dark, waiting to be found. There is a secret buried in the stones of Hogwarts, a secret that most of the wizards and witches who walk its halls have never even glimpsed. It does not announce itself with a flash of light or a crack of displaced air. It is not taught in any classroom, not written in any standard textbook, and yet it is the very reason the castle exists where it does. To understand this secret, you have to stop looking at the magic you know, the magic of swishes and flicks, of Latin incantations and precise wand movements, and start paying attention to something far older, something that whispers. If you could stand in the oldest corridor of Hogwarts, the one that twists in a way that no architect ever intended, and if you possessed the rare and unsettling gift to see what most cannot, you would notice a faint shimmer. It would not be the golden sparkle of a freshly cast charm or the silver haze of a protective enchantment. It would be blue, a deep, swirling blue like smoke from a fire that burns without fuel. It would curl around the corners of the stonework, seeping from the mortar as if the very walls were breathing. This is the first and most intimate sign of ancient magic. It is not cast, it is simply there. It is a residue, a lingering presence of a power so foundational that it has become part of the geography itself. This sensory experience is the key to understanding everything that follows. For most of magical history, the wizarding world has defined itself by its tools. The wand is the great equalizer, the conduit that allows a trained mind to impose its will upon reality. You learn a spell, you practice the movement, you speak the words, and the world obeys. It is a system of cause and effect, of discipline and repetition. By the late 19th century, this system had become the very definition of magic. To be a witch or a wizard was to be a master of technique. But beneath this polished surface, something else was always stirring. Ancient magic does not require a wand. It does not require an incantation. It requires something far more difficult to define. It is a resonance, a connection to the raw, unshaped forces that existed before wizards decided to organize the chaos into neat little branches of study. Think of modern magic as a language, carefully constructed with grammar and vocabulary. Ancient magic is the sound of the first voice that ever spoke. It is older than words. It is older than the concept of spells, and it is far, far more dangerous. This is the distinction that the founders of Hogwarts understood. A distinction that has been largely forgotten by the time we reach the era of the Hogwarts legacy. In the late 19th century, the wizarding world was confident. It had its ministry, its schools, its established laws of magical theory. But the founders, Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin, they built their school not just on a hill in the Scottish Highlands, they built it on a nexus. They chose that specific location because the ground itself was saturated with ancient power. They did not build Hogwarts to house a school. They built a school to contain and protect what was already there. The castle is a lid on a well of forgotten magic. The walls do not just hold up the roof. They hold back a force that could reshape reality if it were ever fully unleashed. It is why the corridors shift. This is why rooms appear only to those who need them. The common explanation is that the castle is simply enchanted to be sentient, but that is a comforting simplification. The truth is that the castle is alive because it is built upon a living foundation of ancient magic. The whispers in the walls are not just echoes of past spells. They are the voice of the earth itself, a constant, low hum of power that the founders learned to harness and to hide. To be sensitive to this magic is a rare and isolating experience. Imagine walking through the Great Hall, surrounded by floating candles and the chatter of hundreds of students, and seeing trails of blue smoke weaving between the tables, tracing patterns that no one else can see. Imagine feeling a pull toward a blank wall, knowing that something is behind it, something that vibrates at a frequency that your bones can detect but your eyes cannot confirm. This is the burden of those who can perceive ancient magic. They are not just powerful, they are attuned to a secret history that the rest of the world has chosen to forget. The traces themselves are not always benign. When ancient magic is used, it does not simply dissipate like the smoke from a finished spell. It leaves a mark. These marks can linger for centuries, and if they are not properly contained, they can warp the environment around them. A room where a powerful act of ancient magic once occurred might feel perpetually cold. A corridor might seem longer than it should be, or the air might taste of copper and ozone. The keepers, the secret guardians of this knowledge, understood that the power was not something to be used lightly. Every time it is invoked, a debt is paid to the fabric of reality, and if that debt is not managed, the consequences can be catastrophic. This is the dark truth that the curriculum never mentions. Hogwarts is a school of magic, yes, but it is also a fortress, built to imprison a power that most of its inhabitants cannot even perceive. The lessons in charms and transfiguration are safe. They are predictable, they follow the rules, but the ancient magic that sleeps beneath the castle follows no rules. It is wild, it is primal, and it is waiting. The emotional weight of this power is perhaps its most unsettling aspect. Ancient magic is not neutral, it is deeply tied to the most extreme human experiences. Willingly, giving your life to save another, a sacrifice made not in the heat of battle, but but with full awareness and consent. This is an act that can trigger ancient magic. So can profound sorrow, or a love so fierce that it defies reason. These are not the ingredients of a standard potion or the components of a controlled spell. They are raw, chaotic forces that the modern wizarding world has tried to tame with rules and regulations. But you cannot regulate a feeling, you cannot legislate a sacrifice. And that is why ancient magic remains so dangerous. It is honest. It responds to the truth of the heart, not the precision of the tongue. By the late 19th century, the knowledge of how to wield this force had become almost extinct. The wizarding world had moved on. It had built its ministry, its courts, its banks. It had standardized magic into a commodity. The old ways were seen as primitive, even barbaric. The whispers in the walls were dismissed as ghost stories, or the eccentricities of an old castle. But the power did not go away, it simply waited. It waited for someone who could see the blue trails, who could feel the pull of the hidden chambers, who could hear the whispers that were not words but intentions. That is the foundation upon which the story of Hogwarts' legacy is built. It is not a story about learning a new spell. It is a story about rediscovering a lost language, a language written in the bones of the earth and the blood of the brave. The castle is not just a setting, it is a character, and it has been keeping a secret for 1,000 years. The walls are not silent, they are whispering, and if you listen closely enough, you might just hear what they have been trying to say. This brings us to the very nature of the magic that flows through a wizard's hand. We have spent this chapter exploring the difference between the magic you learn and the magic like you are born into, between the structured spell and the primal force. But there is another layer to this mystery, a question that haunts every scholar who has ever studied the ancient traces. What happens when the wand is set aside entirely? What happens when a wizard relies not on a crafted tool, but on the raw, unmediated power of their own will? That is the subject we must turn to next, as we move beyond the wand and into a territory where the very definition of a wizard begins to blur. In the last chapter, we talked about those blue, swirling traces, the whispers of something older than any spell ever taught at Hogwarts. We drew a line between the precise, controlled magic of a wand and the raw, untamed forces that seem to pulse just beneath the surface of reality. But to truly understand what we're dealing with, we have to go further back. We have to ask a question that the Ministry of Magic would rather you never consider. What if magic doesn't need a wizard at all? Think about that for a moment. Every lesson at Hogwarts, every incantation in a textbook, every flick of a wand, it all implies that magic is something you do. It's a skill, a craft, a discipline you master through study and practice. But what if that entire framework is built on a lie? What if the magic you learn in Charms class is just a faint echo of something that has always been here, moving through the world on its own terms, completely indifferent to whether a witch or wizard is present to command it? This is the heart of what we call ancient magic. It is not a branch of spellcraft. It is not a more powerful version of a stunning spell or a particularly clever transfiguration. It is magic that exists independently of human effort or incantation. It is the power of a forest that has stood for the energy of a ley line that runs deeper than any mountain, the raw, untamed force that the first wizards stumbled upon when they were still learning to speak. It predates the first wizards, it predates the first wands, it predates the very idea of a spell. The keepers of Hogwarts' legacy understood this. They knew that the magic they guarded was not something they invented. It was something they discovered. They were not its creators, they were its stewards. And that distinction is crucial because it means ancient magic operates on its own logic. It can be invoked, yes, but it cannot be controlled in the way a modern wizard controls a levitation charm. It can be triggered by an act of pure love, a moment of absolute despair, or a sacrifice so profound that it rewrites the rules of existence. It can move people across space without a portkey. It can seal a room so that no force in the world can open it. It can leave behind traces that linger for centuries, humming with a power that is neither good nor evil, but simply. And that is exactly why the Ministry of Magic fears it. The Ministry is an institution built on order. It categorizes, regulates, and standardizes. It has laws for underage magic, rules for apparition, and a whole department dedicated to the proper use of time turners. But how do you regulate something that cannot be taught? How do you license a power that only a handful of people can even perceive? How do you control a force that can be unleashed by a mother's love or a dragon's rage? You can't, and that lack of control terrifies them. The Ministry's fear is not just bureaucratic anxiety. It is a deep institutional dread of the unknown. They have spent centuries building a system that makes magic predictable, safe, and manageable. They have convinced themselves that a wand is the only proper tool for a witch or wizard. They have written textbooks that reduce the infinite complexity of magic to a set of incantations and wand movements. And then, from the shadows of history, comes this reminder that their entire system is a house of cards. Ancient magic does not care about the Ministry's rules. It does not care about the trace. It does not care about the statute of secrecy. It is the wild, untamable heart of the magical world, and it has been here since long before the first wizard ever picked up a wand. This is why the keepers hid it. This is why they built vaults and trials and puzzles to protect it. Not because they wanted to hoard power, but because they understood that some forces are too fundamental to be wielded by the unprepared. They knew that ancient magic in the wrong hands could unravel the very fabric of reality. They also knew that the Ministry, for all its intentions, would try to cage it, and that would be even worse. So here we are, in the late 19th century, in a world where this primordial power is already considered a lost art. The wizarding world has moved on. They have their wands, their spells, their comfortable certainties. They have forgotten that the ground beneath Hogwarts is built on foundations older than any castle. They have forgotten that the stones themselves remember a time when magic was not something you did, but something you. But the traces remain. Those blue swirls of energy, barely visible to the naked eye, are the fingerprints of a deeper reality. They are the evidence that the old powers are still here, waiting. And soon, someone will come who can see them clearly. Someone who will walk the halls of Hogwarts and feel the weight of 10,000 years pressing down on their shoulders. Someone who will have to decide whether to protect this secret, or to let it loose upon a world that has forgotten how to listen. That story begins with an incident, an event so strange, so unsettling, that it would force the Ministry to confront the very thing they had tried so hard to ignore. It would happen in the year 1890, and it would change everything. But that is a tale for our next chapter. For now, rest with the knowledge that the magic you have been taught is only the surface. Beneath it, there is something older, something that does not need a wand, something that has always been there, waiting for the right moment to remind the world that it was here first. The previous chapter explored magic that exists independently of human effort or incantation, the endemic powers of reality that predated the first wizards. And now we arrive at a moment in history where those powers stirred with an urgency that had not been felt for centuries. The late Victorian era, a time of gas lamps, steam engines, and rigid social order, was also a time of something far stranger beneath the surface. It was during the 1890s that ancient magic surged with a frequency and intensity that alarmed those few who could still sense it. But here is the puzzle that has haunted magical historians ever since. Why then? Why that particular decade, in that particular corner of the wizarding world? To understand the 1890s incident, we must first acknowledge what was happening in the broader magical landscape. By the late 19th century, the wizarding community had become deeply institutionalized. The Ministry of Magic was firmly established. Hogwarts had been running for nearly 1,000 years, and the teaching of magic had become standardized, codified, and safe. Spells were taught from textbooks. Incantations were memorized, wand movements were practiced until they became muscle memory. The wild, untamed magic of earlier ages had been tamed, or so the professors believed. But ancient magic does not obey the rules of a classroom. It does not care about curriculum or examination standards. It exists beneath the surface of reality, and when it stirs, it does so for reasons that are not always clear to the wizards who walk above it, and stir it did. In the 1890s, reports began to surface from various corners of the magical world of strange phenomena that could not be explained by conventional spellcraft. Traces of blue smoke were seen flickering in the Forbidden Forest, around the base of the Astronomy Tower, and deep within the dungeons of Hogwarts itself. These were not the kind of magical residues left behind by a student practicing a summoning charm. These were something older, something that seemed to pulse with a rhythm that was not quite of the present age. The professors at Hogwarts, many of them respected scholars in their fields, were baffled. They conducted investigations, cast detection spells, and consulted ancient texts, but the traces remained elusive, visible only to a select few, and that is where the story takes its most intriguing turn. Among the students at Hogwarts during this period was a 5th year who possessed a rare and extraordinary ability. This student could perceive the traces of ancient magic that the professors could not, while the faculty relied on their decades of training and their extensive libraries. This young witch or wizard simply saw the blue smoke curling through the corridors, winding around the pillars of the Great Hall, and pooling in the corners of abandoned classrooms. It was not a matter of study or effort. It was a matter of perception, a sensitivity that could not be taught and could not be acquired. The professors, for all their knowledge, were blind to what this student could see as clearly as daylight. Imagine the frustration, the isolation, and the weight of that gift. To walk through Hogwarts and witness a layer of reality that everyone else is oblivious to. To try to explain it to a professor and be met with polite skepticism or outright dismissal. The student tried to share what they saw, but the words fell flat. How do you describe a colour that no one else can perceive? How do you prove the existence of a force that leaves no trace in any known magical instrument? The professors, bound by their training and their assumptions, concluded that the student was either mistaken, exaggerating, or perhaps suffering from a form of magical sensitivity that had no basis in reality. They did not, and perhaps could not, accept that a 5th year might understand something that they themselves could not. But the traces did not stop. They grew stronger. The blue smoke became more vivid, more insistent. It began to manifest in ways that were impossible to ignore, even for the skeptical faculty. Objects moved on their own in the dead of night. Rooms rearranged themselves without warning. Students reported hearing whispers in the walls, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The castle itself seemed to be waking up. Or perhaps it was something within the castle that had been sleeping for a very long time. And then came the incident. It is difficult to find precise records of what happened, because the events were deliberately obscured. The official story, the one that made it into the textbooks, is that there was a minor magical disturbance, quickly contained, with no lasting consequences. But those who were there, those who could see the blue smoke, knew otherwise. The incident involved a surge of ancient magic so powerful that it threatened to destabilize the very foundations of Hogwarts. The student who could perceive the traces was at the center of it, not as a cause but as a witness, a conduit, perhaps even a key. The ancient magic had chosen this moment to reveal itself, and it had chosen this student to see it. The aftermath was swift and silent. The Ministry of Magic, in cooperation with the Hogwarts faculty, undertook a systematic erasure of the events. Records were sealed, testimonies were suppressed. The textbooks that future generations would study were carefully edited to remove any mention of the 1890s incident. The student who had seen the truth was quietly guided away from the spotlight, their gift acknowledged in private but never celebrated in public. The blue smoke faded, or at least it stopped manifesting in ways that could be easily detected. The castle returned to its normal rhythms. The professors went back to their lectures, and the world moved on. But the erasure itself tells us something important. Why go to such lengths to hide what happened? Why scrub the records of a single decade if it was truly as minor as the official story claims? The answer, I believe, lies in the nature of ancient magic itself. It is not just powerful, it is dangerous, it is unpredictable, and it is deeply unsettling to the established order of the wizarding world. The ministry and the faculty at Hogwarts had built their authority on the assumption that magic could be controlled, categorized, and taught. Ancient magic, with its wild, untamed energy, threatened that entire foundation. It suggested that there were forces at work that no amount of regulation could contain. And so, rather than confront that truth, they chose to bury it. The 1890s incident is not just a historical footnote. It is a window into the fear that ancient magic inspires in those who hold power. It is a reminder that the wizarding world, for all its wonders, is built on a foundation of secrets. And it is a testament to the rare individuals who can see what others cannot, who carry the burden of a truth that the world is not ready to accept. As we move forward, we will explore the phenomenon that lies at the heart of this mystery, the blue smoke that only a few can perceive, the traces that the professors dismissed, the whispers that the textbooks ignore, and the power that the ministry tried to erase. The next chapter will take us deeper into the visual signature of ancient magic and the implications of a force that refuses to be forgotten. The previous chapter ended with a fifth-year student, a late Victorian anomaly, stepping into a world that had been invisible to almost everyone else for centuries. They saw the blue smoke. But what exactly are they seeing? It is not merely a colour or a trick of the light. It is a phenomenon that rewrites the very rules of magical physics as they were understood in the 1890s. To the ordinary witch or wizard, a spell is a transaction. You provide the will, the wand movement, the incantation, and the magic responds. It flares, it fades, and it is gone. But ancient magic leaves a signature. It does not simply vanish into the ether. It stains the world around it, leaving behind a visual echo that can persist for decades, sometimes centuries. This is the blue smoke phenomenon, and it is far more unsettling than any textbook ever suggested. Think of it as a kind of magical radiation. When a conventional spell is cast, the energy is spent. It accomplishes its purpose and dissipates. But ancient magic, because it is drawn from the fundamental fabric of reality itself, does not all return to that fabric cleanly. It can leave a residue, a trace, and that trace is visible as a swirling, almost ethereal blue vapour, curling through the air, clinging to stone, winding around ancient artefacts like a living thing. It is not smoke in the literal sense. It does not rise from a fire. It moves with a purpose, as if it remembers the spell that created it and is waiting for something. This residue is not inert. It is active. It hums with a low, almost imperceptible frequency that those with the sight can feel in their bones. The air around a concentrated trace of ancient magic feels thick, charged, like the pressure before a thunderstorm, and it can be dangerous. The keepers, the secret guardians of Hogwarts' deepest magical secrets, understood this better than anyone. They knew that a poorly contained ancient spell could leave behind a pocket of unstable energy, a wound in the world that could warp the environment around it. A corridor might become longer on the inside than it was on the outside. A room might refuse to let you leave. A patch of ground might become permanently untethered from the flow of time. This is why the keepers were so concerned. They were not just preserving knowledge. They were managing a toxic waste site. The blue smoke is the visible marker of that toxicity. It is the warning sign that something fundamental has been disturbed. And for the rare individual who can see it, that warning is constant. It is a permanent, ambient awareness of all the magical scars that have been carved into the world over millennia, which brings us to the biological toll. The sight is not a gift. It is a burden. It is a sensory overload that the brain was never designed to handle. Imagine walking through Hogwarts, a castle already thick with centuries of ordinary magic, and seeing it layered with a second, older, more chaotic dimension of swirling blue energy. You would see the trails of spells cast by long-dead founders. You would see the residual emotion of ancient sacrifices, the shimmering outlines of protective enchantments that have long since been forgotten. It would be like trying to hear a single conversation in a room full of screaming ghosts. Those who possess this sight often describe a persistent pressure behind the eyes, a low-grade headache that never fully goes away. Some report a ringing in the ears, a high-pitched frequency that seems to accompany the most potent traces. The mind struggles to process the constant influx of invisible data. It is exhausting. It is isolating, because you cannot explain it to anyone who cannot see it. You would sound like a madman, describing the smoke that only you can perceive, the currents that only you can feel pulling at your sleeves. This is the hidden cost of being one of the few. The world is not quiet for you. It is a cacophony of ancient whispers, and you are the only one who can hear them. The blue smoke is beautiful, yes. It swirls with an elegance that modern magic cannot replicate, but it is also a reminder that you are living in a world that is haunted by its own history. Every trace is a story, but not all stories are meant to be read. Some are meant to be buried, And that is the dilemma that the keepers faced. They knew that the traces were dangerous. They knew that the residue could accumulate, that it could become unstable, that it could eventually break through the barriers that held it in check. They also knew that the only way to truly contain it was to understand it, to learn the ancient magic that had created it in the first place. But that knowledge came with its own price. It required a willingness to touch the primordial force, to let it flow through you, to risk being overwhelmed by the very power you sought to control. The fifth-year student, the one who could see the blue smoke so clearly, was not just a witness. They were a potential solution, or a potential catastrophe. The keepers had to decide whether to teach them, to trust them with the secrets of containment, or to let the traces continue to accumulate, hoping that the damage would never become critical. It was a choice between action and inaction, between knowledge and ignorance. And as we will see in the next chapter, the burden of that choice would define everything that followed. The keeper's burden was not just about protecting the castle. It was about deciding who was worthy of the truth and who was strong enough to carry the weight of the blue smoke without being consumed by it. The blue smoke we spoke of in the last chapter, those lingering traces of ancient magic that stain the air and the stone. They are not merely a curiosity, they are a warning. They are the exhaust of a force so potent that it cannot simply be used and forgotten. Every spell cast with this primordial energy leaves a scar on the world, a residue that can fester and warp the very fabric of a place if left unchecked. And that is where the keepers enter our story. The keepers were not a government committee or a school board. They were a secret society formed in the shadows of history with a single, terrifying purpose: to protect the world from its own foundations. They understood that ancient magic was not a tool to be mastered, but a force to be contained. It was a fire that could warm a village or consume an entire kingdom. And they were the ones who stood watch over the embers. They were not wizards seeking power. They were wardens who had accepted a burden that would define their entire existence. The most prominent of these wardens, the name that echoes through the Hogwarts legacy, is Percival Rackham. He was not a headmaster or a minister of magic. He was a professor, a scholar of the deep and dangerous arts, a man who saw the blue smoke and understood its cost. Rackham was the architect of the keeper's most sacred duty, the guardianship of the ancient reservoirs. These were not lakes of water or caverns of gold. They were places where the raw, untamed magic of the earth had pooled, like oil seeping up from a deep geological fault. To tap into one was to drink from a well that had no bottom, and to leave it unguarded was to invite catastrophe. Rackham and his fellow keepers, names like Charles Rookwood and Niamh Fitzgerald, were not merely powerful, they were defined by their restraint. They had the ability to wield this force, to bend it to their will, but they chose instead to lock it away. They built intricate magical vaults, hidden in the mountains and beneath the school itself, each one a prison for a fragment of this overwhelming power. They did this because they understood the central ethical dilemma that defines their entire order. Is it better to hoard a dangerous power, to keep it hidden and risk its eventual discovery? Or is it better to destroy it entirely, to erase it from existence and lose whatever good it might one day do? This is the question that haunts the keeper's legacy. They chose to hoard. They built their vaults. They set their trials. And they waited for someone worthy to inherit their burden. But in doing so, they created a temptation. Every vault is a locked door, and every locked door invites a key. The power they sought to protect became a prize, a treasure map for those who would misuse it. The goblins, for instance, have long memories, and they remember a time when this magic was not hidden. They remember when it was used to forge their most ancient artifacts, to give them a strength and a will of their own. They see the keepers not as protectors, but as thieves who stole a power that once belonged to all magical beings. The keeper's burden, then, is not just the weight of the power they guard, it is the weight of the decision they made. They chose secrecy over destruction, preservation over annihilation. They chose to believe that there would always be a guardian, that the line of keepers would never break. But by the late 19th century, that line had grown thin. The ancient magic was a whisper, a rumour, a faint blue glow seen only by a handful of sensitive souls. The keepers themselves were fading into legend, their vaults forgotten, their trials unsolved. The world they had built to protect the world was itself becoming a ruin. And then, a student arrived at Hogwarts who could see the blue smoke. A student who could feel the pull of those hidden reservoirs. A student who could walk the paths the keepers had laid down centuries ago. The burden was about to be passed, but the question remained. Would the new bearer choose to hoard the power, or would they finally do what the keepers could not? Would they find a way to destroy it, to end the cycle of temptation and danger forever? That is the story that unfolds in the shadow of the castle. But it is not the only story, because while the keepers were watching over the ancient magic, another force was watching them. A force that had its own claim to that primordial fire. A force that was sharpening its blades and forging its own plans in the dark. That is where we must turn next, to the goblins, and to the connection that binds their history to the very foundations of the wizarding world. The keepers believed they were protecting the world from a force too dangerous to be understood. They sealed away the reservoirs of ancient magic, locked the secrets of its use behind trials of character and intent, and assumed that their vigilance would be enough. But they made one critical error in their calculations. They assumed that the only beings who would ever seek out this power were human wizards. They forgot that the world of magic is not, and has never been, exclusively human. This is where the story of ancient magic takes a darker, more complicated turn, because the keepers were not the only ones who knew about the primordial forces buried beneath the earth. There were others, beings who had walked the magical world long before the first wand was ever carved, who remembered a time when magic was not something you learned from a book, but something you breathed, something you bled, something that belonged to the earth itself. And they had their own reasons for wanting it back. To understand why non-human beings like goblins and dragons have a fundamentally different relationship with ancient magic, you have to strip away everything you think you know about how magic works in the wizarding world. Modern magic, the kind taught at Hogwarts, is a human invention. It is a system of control, a way of channeling a wild natural force through the rigid framework of incantations, wand movements and precise intent. It is a language, and like any language, it was created by a specific culture for a specific purpose. That purpose was to make magic safe, predictable, and most importantly, exclusive. Wands are the key to this entire system. The wand is not just a tool, it is a filter. It takes the raw, chaotic energy of the universe and forces it through a narrow channel, shaping it into a spell that a human mind can comprehend and command. But wands were never meant for everyone. The lore of wand making, as documented by Mr. Ollivander and his predecessors, is a deeply human tradition, one that has been refined over centuries to respond to the magical signature of a human witch or wizard. A goblin can hold a wand, but the wand will never truly bond with them the way it bonds with a human. The magic will always feel foreign, resistant, like trying to speak a language that was never meant for your tongue. This is the dark truth about wand lore that the wizarding world prefers not to discuss. The wand, for all its elegance and power, is an instrument of restriction. It was designed to restrict magic to a human-only privilege. Before wands existed, magic was a wild, untamed force that belonged to the world itself. Dragons did not need wands to breathe fire. Goblins did not need incantations to forge metal that could cut through enchanted steel. They simply reached into the earth, into the reservoirs of ancient magic that flowed beneath the surface, and they pulled that power into themselves. They were not casting spells. They were communing with the very fabric of reality. This is why goblins, in particular, have always had a strained and often violent relationship with the wizarding world. It is not simply a matter of prejudice or economic inequality. Though those certainly play their part, the conflict runs much deeper. It is a conflict over the very definition of magic itself. The wizarding world insists that magic is something that must be learned, controlled, and channeled through human-made tools. The Goblin tradition holds that magic is something that is already within you, something that can be shaped by will alone, without the need for a wand. This philosophical divide is the true root of Ranrock's rebellion. On the surface, it appears to be a straightforward uprising, a goblin rebellion against oppressive wizard rule. But when you look closer, when you examine the artifacts he was seeking and the power he was trying to harness, you realize that Ranrock was not simply fighting for political freedom. He was fighting for magical equality, but not the kind of equality that means sharing the same schools and the same laws. He was fighting for a return to the old way, a world where goblins could access the same primordial force that their ancestors had wielded, a force that did not require a wand or a wizard's permission. Ranrock understood something that the Keepers had tried to bury. He understood that ancient magic was not just a human resource, it was the birthright of every magical being. And the wizarding world had stolen it. They had locked it away behind their trials and their vaults. They had built their castle on top of it, and they had rewritten the history of magic to erase the contributions of every non-human race that had ever touched it. The rebellion was not just about goblin rights, it was about reclaiming a power that had been unjustly taken. And this is where the story becomes truly unsettling, because Ranrock was not entirely wrong. The ancient magic that the Keepers guarded so jealously was not created by humans. It was not created by anyone. It is a force of nature, as old as the earth itself, and it does not recognize the boundaries of species or the laws of the ministry. It responds to will, to emotion, to the raw desire to shape the world. A goblin who learns to tap into that force is not doing something unnatural. They are doing something that their ancestors did for millennia, before the first wizard ever picked up a piece of wood and tried to force the world to obey them. The tragedy of Ranrock's rebellion is that his methods were destructive, his ambition was reckless, and his refusal to seek a peaceful resolution doomed his cause from the start. But the grievance at the heart of his movement was real. The wizarding world had built its entire civilization on the suppression of non-human magical traditions. They had taken a force that was meant to be shared and turned it into a weapon of control. And when a goblin tried to take it back, they called him a villain. This is the dark truth that the Keepers never wanted to confront. They believed they were protecting the world from chaos, but they were also protecting a system of privilege. They were preserving a world where only humans could wield the deepest magic, where the power of the earth itself was filtered through the narrow lens of wand law, where a dragon's fire and a goblin's forge were dismissed as lesser forms of magic, when in truth they were echoes of a much older, much more direct connection to the primordial source. The dragons, of course, never needed to rebel. They never needed to fight for magical equality, because they never lost their connection to ancient magic in the first place. A dragon does not learn to breathe fire, it simply does. The fire is part of its being, drawn from the same deep well of primordial energy that fuels the earth. Dragons are living conduits of ancient magic, and they have never been domesticated, never been truly controlled, because the power that flows through them cannot be contained by a wand or a spell. The wizarding world has tried for centuries to study dragons, to classify them, to reduce them to beasts that can be understood and managed. But the dragon remains a mystery, a reminder that there are forces in this world that will never bow to human will. And that is what makes the Goblin Connection so dangerous. Goblins are not dragons. They are intelligent, organized, and they remember. They remember a time when their smiths could forge armor that could turn aside any curse, when their metalwork was infused with the same ancient magic that now lies buried beneath Hogwarts. They remember that the wizarding world did not invent magic. They merely claimed it. And when a goblin like Ranrock rises up and declares that he will take back what was stolen, he is not just speaking for himself. He is speaking for every non-human being who has ever been told that their magic is lesser, that their traditions are primitive, that they must learn to use a wand if they want to be taken seriously. The keepers tried to bury this truth. They sealed the reservoirs, they hid the knowledge, and they hoped that the world would forget. But the world did not forget. The goblins did not forget. And when the ancient magic began to stir again, in the late 19th century, it was not just a human student who heard its call. The goblins felt it too. They felt it in the earth beneath their forges, in the metal that sang under their hammers, in the deep, resonant hum of a power that had been sleeping for too long. And they decided that they would not let the wizards keep it to themselves. This is the conflict that defines the era of Hogwarts' legacy. It is not a simple story of good versus evil. It is a story about who gets to decide what magic is, who gets to use it, and who gets to control it. The keepers believed they were protecting the world, but they were also protecting a hierarchy. Ranrock believed he was fighting for freedom, but he was also willing to destroy everything in his path to get it. And caught in the middle is the ancient magic itself, a force that does not care about human laws or goblin grievances, a force that simply exists, waiting for someone brave enough or foolish enough to reach out and take it. And as the reservoirs begin to open, as the blue smoke starts to rise from the earth, one question hangs in the air. If the keepers were wrong about the goblins, if they were wrong about who should have access to this power, then what else were they wrong about? What other secrets did they bury beneath the stones of Hogwarts, believing? The answer to that question lies not in the vaults beneath the castle, but in the very structure of the school itself. Because Hogwarts was not built to be a school, it was built to be a prison for something far older than any of its founders, and the walls that hold that secret in place are beginning to crack. That is the story we will explore in the next chapter, as we turn our attention to the architecture of Hogwarts and the dark foundations upon which the entire castle was raised. The Goblin Rebellion was, at its core, a war over access to a force that neither side fully understood. Ranrock sought to tear open the reservoirs of ancient magic beneath the earth, believing that if he could harness that primordial current, he could finally level the playing field between his kind and the wizard, who had hoarded power for centuries. But what he failed to grasp, what the keepers had spent their lives concealing, was that the most concentrated source of that power was not buried in some remote cavern or hidden beneath a forgotten mountain. It was right there, in plain sight, masquerading as a school. Hogwarts Castle is not merely a building. It is a cage built around a wound in the world. The architects of that cage were the four greatest wizards of their age. And they did not choose the location by accident. They chose it because the ground itself was alive with something older than magic as we know it. Consider the geography of the Scottish Highlands, where the castle sits. The landscape is riddled with ley lines, invisible threads of telluric energy that crisscross the earth like veins. These are not the stuff of fantasy. They are a recognized phenomenon in the study of ancient magical geography. Certain locations, due to their mineral composition, their proximity to underground water, or their alignment with celestial bodies, act as natural conductors for magical currents. The site where Hogwarts was built is one of the most potent of these locations in all of Europe. It is a nexus, a place where the ambient magical pressure is so high that the air itself feels thick with potential. The founders understood this. Godric Gryffindor, with his warrior's instinct for terrain, recognized the strategic advantage of building atop a natural fortress of power. Helga Hufflepuff, whose affinity for the earth and its creatures was unmatched, could sense the lifeblood of the land pulsing beneath the soil. Rowena Ravenclaw, the scholar, would have studied the ancient texts that described these hotspots as places where the veil between the mundane and the magical grew thin. And Salazar Slytherin, the most pragmatic of them all, saw the danger. He knew that such a concentration of power could not be left unguarded. So they built the castle not just as a school, but as a massive lightning rod. The towers, the battlements, the very foundations were designed to channel the ancient magical currents that flowed through the site. The stone itself was enchanted to absorb and redirect the energy, preventing it from erupting uncontrollably into the surrounding countryside. Every brick, every flagstone, every window pane was laid with a purpose: to contain the storm. But a lightning rod does not eliminate the lightning. It merely gives it a path to follow, and over the centuries, that path has become a labyrinth. The castle's architecture is a living map of these currents. The grand staircase, for example, does not move at random. It shifts in response to the ebb and flow of the underlying magical tides, moving to align with the most active channels of energy at any given moment. The room of requirement, that elusive space that appears only when someone truly needs it, is not a separate pocket dimension. It is a bubble that forms naturally in the flow of ancient magic, a quiet eddy in the current where the power pools and becomes malleable. And then there are the chambers that were never meant to be found by ordinary students. These are not the secret rooms that mischievous prefects discover by tapping a certain brick or whispering a password. Those are merely hidden. The true secret chambers are sealed in a different way. They are buried beneath layers of magical sediment, their entrances woven into the fabric of the castle's architecture so seamlessly that they become invisible to the untrained eye. They exist in the spaces between the stones, in the hollows where the ancient magic pools so thickly that it becomes a kind of solid silence. One such chamber is said to lie beneath the Black Lake, its entrance concealed by a waterfall that falls upward. Another is rumoured to be hidden within the very heart of the Whomping Willow, its roots tangled around a doorway that only opens when the moon is in a specific phase. These are not the stuff of student legends. These are the remnants of the founders' original work, the places where they conducted their most dangerous experiments with the raw forces they had tapped into. The castle remembers everything. The stone has absorbed centuries of spells, emotions and sacrifices. Every duel fought in the corridors, every tear shed in the dormitories, every whispered oath in the common rooms has left a trace. The ancient magic that flows through Hogwarts is not a clean, sterile current. It is a river that has been fed by the lives of thousands of witches and wizards, and it carries their echoes with it. This is why the castle behaves the way it does, why the staircases shift, why the portraits gossip, why the ghosts can walk. The castle is not haunted in the traditional sense. It is saturated. The ancient magic that powers it has become a repository for the collective memory of everyone who has ever lived within its walls. And that memory is not always benevolent. There are corridors that students learn to avoid, not because they are forbidden, but because they feel wrong. The air grows cold. The shadows seem to move on their own. A persistent sense of being watched settles into the bones. These are the places where the ancient magic has pooled too deeply, where the emotional residue of some long-forgotten tragedy has become trapped in the current. The keepers knew about these places. They marked them, sealed them, and prayed that no one would ever be foolish enough to open them again. But the castle is not a prison for the ancient magic. It is a vessel, and like any vessel, it can only hold so much. The pressure has been building for 1,000 years. The reservoirs beneath the school are swelling. The lightning rod is beginning to crack. And that is why the events of the 1890s were so significant. That fifth-year student, the one who could see the blue smoke, was not just a rare talent. They were a symptom. The ancient magic had become so concentrated, so restless, that it was beginning to bleed through the seams of the castle's architecture. The traces that the student could perceive were not just remnants of old spells. They were leaks, warning signs that the containment was failing. The keepers knew this. They had always known it. Their entire purpose was to monitor the pressure, to release it in controlled bursts, to ensure that the ancient magic never built up enough to shatter the foundations of the school. But they were gone now, their knowledge lost to time, and the castle was left to manage itself. So the question becomes not whether Hogwarts will fail, but when, and what will happen to the thousands of students inside when the lightning rod finally breaks. The ancient magic will not simply vanish. It will seek a new outlet, a new vessel, a new sacrifice. And that is where the story takes a darker turn, because the price of containing such power has always been paid in blood. The founders knew it, the keepers knew it, and now, as the cracks begin to show, the castle is preparing to demand its due. Up next, we will explore the most disturbing aspect of this entire system, the moment when ancient magic ceases to be a passive force and begins to actively demand a price from those who wield it, the moment when love, sacrifice, and death become currency. That is the subject of Chapter 8, the price of sacrifice. The castle itself is a conduit, a massive silent machine built to channel forces that most wizards cannot even see. But what happens when that force is not drawn from the ground or the sky, but from the very soul of a person? What happens when the price of that power is not a spell, but a sacrifice? To understand this, we have to step back from the 19th century and look forward to a moment that every fan of the Harry Potter books knows by heart: the night Lily Potter died. In the wizarding world, that event is often explained as the power of love, a vague, comforting notion. But if we look closer, through the lens of what we now know about ancient magic, a much darker and more mechanical truth emerges. Lily's sacrifice was not simply an act of love. It was a ritual, a primordial, wandless activation of a force so old that it predates the very concept of spellcasting. The books call it old magic, and Dumbledore speaks of it as a force that Lord Voldemort, in all his arrogance, never understood. But what is old magic, if not the same ancient foundational power that the keepers guarded in the 1900s, the same blue smoke that the fifth-year protagonist could see, swirling around forgotten artifacts? It is the same energy, the same law of reality, and its trigger is not a wand movement or an incantation. Its trigger is the absolute, visceral breaking point of human emotion. Think about what it takes to activate magic without a wand. In the modern era, accidental magic in children is often tied to fear or anger, a burst of uncontrolled power. But ancient magic, the kind that leaves permanent traces on the world, the kind that can shield a soul from death itself, requires a far more specific catalyst. It requires a choice, a conscious, willing offering of one's own life, with no expectation of reward, no bargaining, no hope of survival. It is the purest form of intent, stripped of all selfishness. Lily Potter was given a choice. She could step aside, she could live. And in that moment, when she refused to abandon her son, she did not cast a spell. She simply stood in the way, and the universe, bound by its own ancient laws, responded. The killing curse rebounded, not because of a charm, but because a debt was paid. A life for a life. That is the price of sacrifice. It is the oldest transaction in magic, older than any wand, older than Hogwarts itself. Now, bring that understanding back to the late 1800s. The keepers knew this. They understood that ancient magic was not a tool to be wielded lightly. It was a force that demanded a cost, and they were terrified of what would happen if someone learned how to manufacture that cost, how to weaponize the emotional trigger without the purity of intent. Because here is the terrifying truth. If Lily Potter's sacrifice was a key that unlocked a protective barrier, then what else could that key open? What if someone could recreate the conditions of that sacrifice, not out of love, but out of desperation? What if a witch or wizard, consumed by grief, tried to use that same primordial mechanism to pull a loved one back from the grave? The keepers saw this potential. They saw the traces of ancient magic left behind by such acts, and they knew that some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. The blue smoke you see in the game, those swirling whispers of power, they are not just residue. They are echoes of moments when the boundary between life and death was strained. moments when a human heart beat so loudly against the fabric of reality that it left a scar. And that brings us to the most tragic figure in this entire history, a witch who understood the price of sacrifice better than anyone, but who chose to pay it in the wrong currency. Her name was Isadora Morganach, and her story is not one of love, but of a love twisted into something unrecognizable. It is the story of what happens when someone tries to use ancient magic to erase pain, and in doing so, erases the very thing that makes us human. We ended the last chapter with Lily Potter's sacrifice, a moment that rewrote the rules of magic through an act of pure love. But that story, as powerful as it is only the echo of a much older tragedy. Before Lily, before the boy who lived, there was another witch who believed she could bend ancient magic to heal the deepest wounds of the human heart. Her name was Isadora Morganach, and her story is the dark truth that the keepers tried to bury. Isadora was not born a villain. She was a healer, gifted with a rare sensitivity to the blue smoke of ancient magic. She could see the traces that others could not. And she believed this gift was meant to be used. Her father was dying, not from a curse or a wound, but from something far more insidious, despair. He had lost his wife, Isadora's mother, and the grief had hollowed him out. No conventional spell could reach him. Potions could not soothe his mind, and charms could not mend his spirit. He was fading, and Isadora watched him slip away, day by day, until she made a decision that would echo through centuries. She reached into the ancient magic she could see swirling around him, and she pulled something out. It was not a physical thing, not a tumor or a poison. It was his pain. She drew the sorrow from him, a thick, black mist that she inhaled into herself. The effect was immediate. Her father's eyes cleared. He sat up smiling, as if the years of grief had never happened. But Isadora felt the weight of his suffering settle into her own chest. She had taken his pain, and in doing so, she had discovered a terrible power. This is the dark truth of inhaling emotions as a form of magical sustenance. It is not a metaphor, it is a literal act of consumption. The ancient magic that flows through the world can be used to siphon the very essence of human feeling. Joy, sorrow, fear, love. All of it can be drawn out, inhaled and stored. And for a brief, glorious moment, Isadora believed she had found the cure for all human suffering. She thought she could heal the world by taking its pain into herself. But the keepers, the guardians of ancient magic, saw what she could not. They watched as she began to experiment on other patients. She would draw out their grief, their anger, their trauma, and she would store these emotions in reservoirs. Not physical reservoirs, but magical ones. Pockets of concentrated feeling that she created within the fabric of reality itself. She was building a library of human suffering, and she was filling it with the worst moments of countless lives. The keepers tried to warn her. They told her that ancient magic was not meant to be used this way. They told her that emotions are not impurities to be removed, but essential parts of the human experience. To take away someone's pain is to take away their growth, their resilience, their very humanity. But Isadora would not listen. She was convinced that she was saving people, and she could not see the monster she was becoming. And then came the moment that sealed her fate. She turned to the one person she trusted most, her father. She decided to take away the last remnants of his grief, the deep, primal sorrow that had defined him for so long. She reached into him again, and she pulled out more. But this time, something went wrong. The ancient magic rebelled. The reservoir of pain she had stored inside herself began to leak. It poured out of her, uncontrolled, and it consumed her. Isadora Morganach was lost, not to death, but to the very suffering she had tried to cure. The keepers were left with a terrible legacy. The reservoirs she had created did not vanish when she did. They remained, hidden in the ancient magic hotspots of the world, waiting. These are the most dangerous reservoirs in history, not because they contain curses or dark artifacts, but because they contain pure, undiluted human emotion. A single breach could unleash centuries of grief, rage, and despair into the world, and that is why the keepers sealed them away, guarding the secrets of ancient magic with their lives. Isadora's story is a warning. It shows us that ancient magic is not a tool to be wielded lightly. It is a force that responds to intention, but it does not judge. It will amplify your goodness, but it will also amplify your arrogance. And if you try to play God with the human heart, it will break you. This is the tragedy that the Keepers carried. They knew that the power to heal could also destroy. They knew that good intentions could create the most dangerous reservoirs in history. And they knew that someday someone would come along who could see the blue smoke, just as Isadora did. They hoped that person would be wise enough to learn from her mistakes, that the reservoirs are still there. They are hidden in the ancient magic hotspots that dot the landscape of Hogwarts and the world beyond. And in the next chapter, we will explore exactly what a hotspot is, and why the very ground beneath your feet might be holding a secret that could change everything. The story of Isadora Morganach leaves us with a chilling question. If a witch could learn to siphon sorrow itself, to pull the very essence of human suffering out of a person and into herself, what happened to the places where she practiced? What happened to the ground beneath her feet, the air around her, the stone walls that witnessed those experiments? Because ancient magic, as we have seen, does not simply vanish after it is used. It leaves a mark, it leaves a residue, and that residue over time changes the world around it. This brings us to the anatomy of a hotspot, a term that sounds almost clinical, like something a healer might use to describe a fever on the skin of the world. But in the context of ancient magic, a hotspot is something far more specific. It is a geographical location where the veil between ordinary reality and the primordial forces beneath it has worn thin, where the membrane, if you will, has become permeable, and the result is a place that hums with a frequency most witches and wizards can no longer hear. Think of it like this. You are standing in a forest. The trees are old, the ground is damp, and you feel a strange pressure in the air, a weight that has nothing to do with the weather. That is the sensation of a hotspot. It is not a spell. It is not a charm. It is a condition of the land itself, a scar left by an event so powerful that it permanently altered the local magical geography. And the most common places to find these scars are around ancient ruins and forgotten temples. Why ruins? Why temples? Because those were the places where the old magic was practiced most intensely. Before the Ministry of Magic standardized wand movements and incantations, before the curriculum at Hogwarts was written down in neat little textbooks, magic was raw. It was performed in circles of stone, under open skies, with blood and bone and earth as the primary ingredients. And when you perform magic that deep, that primal, you do not just cast a spell, you open a door, you create a conduit, and sometimes that conduit never fully closes. The environmental decay found around these locations is not the decay of neglect. It is not simply that no one has swept the floors or repaired the roof. It is a decay of the natural order. Plants grow in strange patterns, twisted into shapes that seem to follow invisible currents. The soil may be unusually rich in one spot and barren just a few feet away. Animals avoid the area, or they behave oddly, as if they can sense something their instincts cannot name. And the air itself often carries a faint metallic taste, like copper or old iron, a sign that the magic has oxidized the very atmosphere. This is not a haunted house phenomenon. This is not the work of ghosts or poltergeists. This is a geological and magical reality. The hotspot is a wound in the fabric of the world, and like any wound, it does not heal cleanly. It festers, it leaks, and over centuries, that leakage creates an environment that is subtly but unmistakably wrong. Now, here is the part that the modern Ministry of Magic would rather not discuss. These locations remain invisible to them, not because they cannot be found on a map, but because the Ministry has trained itself to look for the wrong things. The Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes investigates spell damage. The Auras investigate crimes. The improper use of magic office policies underage wizards. But none of these departments are equipped to detect a hotspot, because a hotspot does not register as a magical event. It registers as a geological anomaly, a meteorological curiosity, a biological oddity. It is invisible to the sensors and protocols designed to catch active spellcasting, and there is a reason for that. The Ministry, like the wizarding world at large, has forgotten how to perceive ancient magic. They have replaced that sensitivity with technology, with regulations, with the comfortable illusion that magic can be controlled and categorized. But a hotspot is not a spell. It is not a category. It is a place where the earth itself remembers something the Ministry has chosen to forget. And so the hotspots go unnoticed, unmonitored, uncontained. Consider the ruins of a temple built before the founding of Hogwarts. The walls are crumbling. The roof is gone. Moss covers the floor. But if you know what to look for, you will see the traces. A faint blue shimmer in the air at dusk. A warmth that radiates from the stone, even on the coldest night. A feeling of being watched, even though you are alone. These are the symptoms of a hotspot, and they are the reason the keepers, in their time, worked so hard to seal these places away. They understood that an unguarded hotspot is not just a curiosity, it is a danger. Because if the wrong person finds it, if someone like Ranrock or Isadora Morganach stumbles upon that thin veil, they can pull it open, and what comes through may not be something that can be put back. The geography of these locations is not random. There is a pattern. Hotspots tend to form at ley line intersections, places where the natural magical currents of the earth cross like veins. They also form at sites of mass death or profound emotional release, battlefields, execution grounds, places where a great love or a great despair was poured into the ground. And they form, most of all, at sites of deliberate ancient ritual, the temples, the standing stones, the caves with paintings on the walls. Our ancestors knew where the veil was thin. They built their sacred spaces there on purpose. They wanted to be close to the source, but they also knew how to respect it. They knew when to step back. We have lost that knowledge. The modern Ministry, with all its rules and regulations, has no protocol for a hotspot. They cannot see it, so they cannot police it. And that means these places are left to the wild, to the elements, to the occasional curious traveller who stumbles into a patch of air that tastes like copper and feels like a door that is slightly ajar. This is the anatomy of a hotspot, a geological scar, a permeable veil, a place where the world remembers what the Ministry has forgotten. And as we will see in the next chapter, when we explore the concept of magic without limits, the danger of these locations is not just that they exist, it is that they are waiting. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. We have spent the last chapter standing at the edge of a wound in the earth. We have examined the hotspots, those places where the veil between our world and something older has worn thin, like fabric stretched over a glowing ember. We have seen the environmental decay, the way the ground itself seems to sicken when ancient magic is left to bleed without a keeper. But we have not yet asked the most dangerous question. What happens when that power is not just leaking out of a crack in the stone? What happens when a wizard learns to open the crack themselves and step through? This is where the definition of magic itself begins to fracture. You see, the magic taught at Hogwarts, the magic of Lumos and Wingardium Leviosa, of apparition and portkeys, it is a magic of rules. It has a cost. It has a cooldown. It drains you. It requires intent, a wand, a precise incantation, and a clear mental picture. If you are exhausted, your spells are weaker. If you are distracted, they fizzle. There is a physics to it, a transaction between the wizard and the world. You give focus, you get a result. You give too much, you collapse. Ancient magic does not operate on that ledger. It is not a transaction. It is a permission slip. When you tap into the world's core, when you draw on the primordial currents that flow beneath the bedrock of Hogwarts, You are not spending your own energy. You are simply redirecting a river that has been flowing since before the first human stood upright. There is no exhaustion because you are not the engine, you are the valve. And that is terrifying because a valve has no governor. There is no natural limit to how much you can channel, no built-in safety mechanism that tells you to stop. The only limit is the structure of your own mind, and your mind is fragile. This lack of a cooldown is what separates the ancient practitioners from the modern. A modern duelist, even a great one like Dumbledore, has to pace themselves. They have to breathe. They have to let their magical core regenerate. But a wizard who has fully awakened to ancient magic, a wizard who has learned to breathe in the raw essence of the earth itself, they do not tire, they do not falter. They can cast spell after spell, not because they are stronger, but because they have stopped using their own battery and have plugged directly into the grid. It is the difference between a man carrying water in a bucket and a man who has learned to divert the entire river. And this brings us to the most unsettling application of that limitless power, the manipulation of space and time. We are not talking about a time turner here. That is a device, a piece of clockwork that follows its own strict laws. You can only go back so far. You cannot change what has already happened without catastrophic consequences. The time turner is a tool, and like all tools, it has a handle you can grip and a blade you can measure. Ancient magic has no handle. It has no blade. It is a raw, formless pressure that can bend the fabric of reality, simply because it does not know that reality is supposed to be rigid. Consider the portals. In the modern wizarding world, moving from one place to another requires either apparition, which is dangerous and can be blocked, or a portkey, which is a charmed object that activates at a specific time. Both are forms of travel. They have a destination and a departure point. They are linear. But the portals created by ancient magic, the ones that shimmer with that blue swirling smoke, they are not travel. They are a rewriting of the map. They do not move you through the space between 2 points. They simply decide that the 2 points are the same point. They collapse distance, not by moving you fast, but by denying that distance ever existed. There is a reason the Keepers were so terrified of this power. It is not just that it can hurt you, it is that it can unmake the fundamental rules you rely on to survive. If you can open a portal between the top of the astronomy tower and the bottom of the Black Lake without a wand, without a single moment of strain, then what is to stop you from opening a portal inside a person? What is to stop you from deciding that the space inside their lungs and the space outside their body, the same space? The terrifying potential is not that you can go anywhere. The terrifying potential is that you can make anything anywhere, and you can do it without breaking a sweat. And this is where the lore of the ancient magic hotspots becomes a warning. Those locations we discussed, the forgotten temples, the ruins where the ground is sick, they are not just places where the magic is strong. They are places where someone already tried to bend space. They are the scars of a wizard who had no cooldown, no limit, and no understanding of what they were doing. The environmental decay is not a side effect of the magic being present. It is a side effect of the magic being used badly. It is the echo of a portal that was torn open and never properly closed, a wound in the world that has been bleeding for centuries. Think about what that means for the protagonist of the late 1800s. They are a student, a child, walking through a castle that is built on top of a volcano of this stuff. They have the sensitivity to see the blue traces. They have the ability to channel the power, but they have no teacher who truly understands it. The Keepers are dead. The knowledge is buried. The only instruction they get is from the echoes of ghosts and the whispers of ancient artifacts, and they are expected to use this power to fight a war. They are expected to open portals, to move through space, to shatter the defenses of their enemies, all while running on an infinite fuel source that has no off switch. That is the dark truth. It is not that ancient magic is evil. It is that it is indifferent. It does not care if you use it to save a friend or to unmake a mountain. It will give you the same power for both. It will not warn you when you are pushing too hard, because there is no too hard. The only thing that stops you is the moment you realize you have become something other than human. The moment you look at a wall and realize you do not have to walk around it. You can simply decide it was never there. And that is the bridge to our next chapter. Because if you can manipulate space, if you can bend the stone and the air and the distance between things, then what happens to the place that is doing the bending? What happens to the castle itself? Hogwarts is not just a building built on a hotspot. Hogwarts is a living thing. It has a will. It has a memory. And if you are inside it, channeling the raw power of its foundation, you are not just a wizard in a school. You are a pulse in its bloodstream. The question is not whether you can control the magic. The question is whether the castle is controlling you. That is the story of the Sentient Castle. And it is a story that begins the moment you realize the walls have been watching you since the day you arrived. The portals that bridge dimensions without portkeys or apparition. The tears in the fabric of space we explored last chapter. Those were not accidents. They were deliberate openings, carved into the world by forces that has understood the architecture of reality in a way modern wizards have long forgotten. But what if those portals were not merely doorways? What if they were symptoms of something far larger? Something that has been watching you? What if the castle itself is not a building at all, but a conscious entity? An ancient pre-human mind that has been slowly waking, and that the very stones you walk upon are its nervous system. Consider this: every stair that shifts, every door that locks itself, every corridor that rearranges when you are lost. These are not random enchantments. They are the twitches of a sleeping giant, a consciousness that predates the arrival of the founders by millennia. The evidence is not hidden in dusty tomes or forgotten prophecies. It is written into the very foundations of the school, etched into the bedrock by a force that has no name, because it existed before language itself. The Chamber of Secrets is not the only hidden space. The entire castle is a chamber, a vessel for a mind that has been dormant for so long that even the portraits have forgotten its presence. The Room of Requirement is the clearest proof we have that Hogwarts is not merely a magical building. It is a living organism capable of rewriting physical matter using ancient magic. When you pace before that blank wall on the 7th floor, concentrating on a need, the castle does not simply conjure a room from thin air. It reconstitutes the atoms of the wall itself, pulling raw material from the earth beneath the foundations and reshaping it into whatever you require, from a library of banned books to a field of trampolines. This is not transfiguration as taught in classrooms. This is a fundamental manipulation of the universe's building blocks, a process that modern magic has no framework to explain. The Room of Requirement does not cast spells. It what matter is supposed to be, and then it sits mind, the blue smoke-like traces that those sensitive to ancient magic can perceive are the breath of this living castle, the whispers of its consciousness as it decides what form the walls should take. It is a form of communication, but one we have lost the ability to interpret. The Room of Requirement is not a feature added by the founders. It is a natural outgrowth of the castle's own will, a pressure valve for its awareness. Every time a student finds a broom cupboard that was not there before, or discovers a hidden passage that only opens at midnight, they are interacting with a mind that is constantly, silently adapting to the needs of its inhabitants. Yet this mind has defensive mechanisms that modern wizards can no longer trigger. The protective enchantments placed by the founders are just the surface layer. Beneath them lies a deeper system, a kind of immune response that the castle can activate when it perceives a threat to its psychic integrity. The moving staircases, the shifting walls, the vanishing step that only appears when you are running late. These are ancient reflexes, honed over centuries to confuse intruders. But there are older defenses, mechanisms that have not been used since before the founders built their school. The founders did not construct Hogwarts. They colonized an existing structure of power, a nexus of ancient magic that had been alive for thousands of years. The founders sealed away the most dangerous defenses, but they did not destroy them. They are still there, sleeping beneath the lake, coiled in the roots of the Whomping Willow, waiting for a threat that would justify their awakening. One such mechanism is the castle's ability to close itself off from the outside world entirely, not through locking doors, but by shifting the very space it occupies, becoming only partially connected to our dimension. Modern wizards have no idea how to call this defense into action. It requires a user who can perceive the blue traces, who can speak to the castle in its own language. The keepers of the ancient magic knew this, which is why they forbade the use of certain spells within the halls. Spells that might provoke the castle's awareness and trigger a response that could not be undone. The sentience of Hogwarts is not a gentle thing. It is ancient, patient, and deeply protective of its own nature. It has seen countless generations of students come and go, but it has never cared for any of them as individuals. It cares only for the flow of magic through its halls, for the nourishment it receives from the emotions of those who dwell within it. The castle feeds on the magic of its inhabitants, not through malice, but as a tree feeds on sunlight, unthinkingly, instinctively. The reason the Room of Requirement can provide any physical object is that the castle has been absorbing the magical residue of every student who has ever passed through its walls, storing it in the spaces between the stones. When you ask for a room, it gives back what it has taken. But what happens when the castle begins to wake fully? What happens when its pre-human consciousness decides that the wizards inside it are no longer necessary? The defensive mechanisms that modern wizards can no longer trigger might not be the only things sleeping. Beneath the library, beneath the tangled roots of the forest, there are repositories of knowledge that the founders themselves deemed too dangerous to keep in any memory. They are called the Forbidden Repositories, and they hold the deepest secrets of the castle's true nature. Secrets that, once uncovered, might change everything you thought you knew about the school that has been your home. We have established that Hogwarts itself is not merely a building, but a living entity, a consciousness woven from ancient magic that predates the stones of its own foundation. The Room of Requirement is not a charm. It is a conversation with the castle's own will. But if the castle is alive, then we must ask a far more unsettling question. What does a living thing do with its pain? Where does a sentient, primordial force store its deepest wounds? This brings us to the hidden geography of the wizarding world, the places that are not on any map, not even the marauders. What lies beneath the surface of the wizarding world's most secure vaults is not gold, not artifacts, not even dark secrets in the traditional sense. It is something far more raw, far more dangerous. It is pain itself, distilled into a physical form. Consider the nature of ancient magic for a moment. We have spoken of its connection to sacrifice, to love, to the extreme emotional states that warp reality. But if a positive emotion like love can leave a protective trace, what happens to sorrow, to despair, to the agony of 1,000 years of tragedy? The Keepers, those ancient guardians of Hogwarts' deepest mysteries, understood a terrible truth. Ancient magic does not simply vanish when it is used. It leaves a residue, and that residue, if left unchecked, accumulates. The repositories are not libraries. They are not armories. They are pressure vessels, designed to contain the overflow of a world's collective anguish. The physical manifestation of pain as a silver liquid magical resource is not a metaphor. It is a substance that exists. It flows like mercury, but it is lighter than air, and it has a temperature that you feel in your teeth rather than on your skin. This silver liquid is the crystallized echo of every tragedy that has ever soaked into the stones of Hogwarts. Every scream that was swallowed by the walls. Every moment of hopelessness that was too heavy for a single soul to carry. The ancient magic that built the castle did not just create corridors and classrooms. It created a circulatory system, and just as a body must filter its own blood, the castle must filter its own memory. The repositories are the kidneys of this living fortress. They sit in chambers that are not accessed by doors, but by intention. You cannot stumble upon them. You can only be led there by a desperate need to understand, or by a reckless desire to wield power that was never meant to be held. And this is where the danger becomes catastrophic, because these reservoirs are not stable. They are not inert. They are alive with the very emotions they were meant to contain. The silver liquid does not sit still. It swirls, it pulses, it reaches. It has a hunger. It remembers the pain it was born from, and it wants to be felt again. The keepers knew that the only safe way to interact with these repositories was through a carefully guarded ritual, a process that involved siphoning the pain in controlled doses, neutralizing it through an act of pure empathetic understanding. But there was another way, a darker way, the method that Isadora Morganach attempted to perfect. She did not want to neutralize the pain. She wanted to absorb it. She wanted to inhale the silver liquid and transform it into something she could control. She believed she could cure suffering by removing it entirely, by pulling the pain out of a person and storing it in a repository, but she misunderstood the nature of the substance. Pain, when removed from its source, does not become harmless. It becomes concentrated. It becomes a poison that is no longer attached to a single memory, but to the raw sensation of agony itself. The repositories beneath Hogwarts are not just full of the pain of students who scraped their knees or failed their transfiguration exams. They contain the residue of wars, of plagues, of betrayals that shattered entire families. They hold the sorrow of the founders themselves, the grief of Godric Gryffindor when he lost his closest friend, the despair of Salazar Slytherin when he felt his vision for the school was being rejected. These are not small emotions. They are tectonic forces pressed into a liquid state by the pressure of centuries. Now consider the worst-case scenario. What happens if these reservoirs are breached? What happens if the silver liquid is released not into the careful hands of a trained keeper, but into the open air? The catastrophic risk of these reservoirs leaking into the Muggle world is not just a magical concern, it is an existential one, because the Muggle world has no defenses against this kind of substance. Muggles cannot see ancient magic. They cannot perceive the blue traces that we have discussed, but they can feel the effects. If a repository were to leak, the silver liquid would not appear as a glowing river to a Muggle eye. It would appear as a fog, a strange mist that settles over a town, and then the emotions would begin. Not subtle emotions, not a vague sense of sadness, but overwhelming, inexplicable waves of despair. Suicides would spike. Violence would erupt without cause. Entire communities would be gripped by a collective depression that no doctor could diagnose. Because the cause is not chemical, it is magical. It is the physical manifestation of pain, seeping into the water table, into the air, into the dreams of every person within miles. The Ministry of Magic, in its infinite bureaucracy, has protocols for magical disasters. They have obliviators. They have accidental magic reversal squads, but they have no protocol for a leak of pure emotional residue. How do you erase the memory of a feeling? How do you reverse a sorrow that has no source? You cannot. You can only contain it, and hope that the damage is limited. This is why the keepers were so secretive. This is why the repositories are forbidden, not because they contain dark magic in the traditional sense, but because they contain the truth of what magic really is. Magic is not just a tool. It is a living record of every heart that has ever beat in its presence, and some records are too painful to read. The silver liquid is not evil. It is not malicious. It is simply honest. It is the unvarnished, unedited history of suffering, and to look at it is to feel every ounce of that suffering as if it were your own. The ancient magic that allows a person to perceive these traces is the same magic that allows them to be overwhelmed by them. There is no shield against empathy. There is no spell that can protect you from feeling the pain of 1,000 years. So the repositories sit, sealed in chambers that the castle itself guards. Hogwarts knows what it holds. The sentient consciousness of the castle is not just aware of its own history, it is the keeper of its own wounds, and it has chosen to keep them locked away, deep beneath the ground, where even the most curious student cannot find them. But the question that haunts the lore is this: what happens when the castle can no longer hold them? What happens when the pressure becomes too great and the silver liquid begins to seep through the cracks in the foundation? The answer is not in the history books. It is not in the restricted section of the library. It is hidden in a century that was deliberately erased from the official records, a period of time that the ministry and the keepers agreed to never speak of again. That is the story we must turn to next. The story of the lost century, and what was done to ensure that the repositories would never be gotten, even as they were hidden from the world. We close the last chapter, standing in a vault that should not exist, staring at silver liquid that was never meant to be seen, pain rendered into a physical resource, stored like wine in a cellar beneath a bank that claims to guard only gold. That vault was a relic of an age when ancient magic was still understood, still practiced, still feared. But something happened between that age and the one we know. Between the late 1800s and the late 1900s, ancient magic did not simply fade from memory, it vanished. And the question is not how, but why. Consider the timeline for a moment. In the 1890s, the world of Hogwarts legacy is alive with ancient magic. The protagonist can see it, touch it, wield it. The keepers are still a living memory. The traces of old power are everywhere, from the coastal cliffs of Feldcroft to the hidden corridors of the castle itself. Fast forward 100 years, and we arrive at the era of Harry Potter. Ancient magic is a rumour, a footnote in obscure texts, a concept that even Albus Dumbledore refers to with a kind of wistful vagueness. What happened in that century? The answer may be more unsettling than any curse. There is a theory among those who study the deeper currents of magical history. It is called the magical recess. The idea is simple and terrifying. The world's core power, the very substance that makes magic possible, does not burn at a constant rate. It pulses, it breathes, and sometimes it goes dormant. Imagine a great ocean tide that pulls back from the shore, leaving the sand exposed and dry. That is what happened to ancient magic. It receded, not because it was destroyed, not because it was forgotten, but because the world itself decided, on a level far beneath human comprehension, that it was time for the old power to sleep. But here is where the story becomes darker. The recess was not a natural event that caught the wizarding world by surprise. It was anticipated, and it was managed. The keepers, those ancient guardians we discussed in earlier chapters, did not simply fade away. They made a choice. They decided that the truth of what was coming was too dangerous to share, so they suppressed it. They sealed the knowledge of the recess inside themselves, inside their portraits, inside the very foundations of Hogwarts. And they passed that burden to the headmasters who followed. This is the role of the headmasters that is never spoken aloud in the history books. They were not just administrators of a school, they were custodians of a secret. Every headmaster from the late 19th century forward knew that ancient magic was withdrawing from the world. They knew that the traces left behind were not just echoes of the past, but wounds in the fabric of reality. And they knew if the truth got out, if the wizarding population understood that their power was diminishing at its source, panic would follow. So they lied, not with words but with silence. They let the curriculum shift. They let the old texts gather dust. They allowed ancient magic to become a myth. Consider the implications for a moment. Hogwarts itself was built on a foundation of ancient magic. The castle is alive, we have established that. But if the core power of the world goes dormant, what happens to a building that is sustained by that power? The answer is that the castle adapts. It learns to draw on the residual energy of its own history, on the memories of the students who have walked its halls, on the love and fear and hope that have soaked into its stones for 1,000 years. Hogwarts becomes a battery, running on the emotional residue of generations. because the original fuel source has gone quiet. And this is why the traces in the late 1800s are so vivid, so dangerous. They are the last gasps of a dying fire. The blue smoke that the protagonist of Hogwarts Legacy perceives is not just a sign of ancient magic, it is a sign of the recess. The power is leaving, and what remains is burning itself out in a final, brilliant display. The Keepers knew this. They built their repositories, they stored their pain, they created their safeguards, all in the hope that when the rest ended, when the tide returned, the knowledge would still be there. But the recess lasted longer than anyone expected. A century is a long time for a world to live without its deepest power. Generations grew up never knowing what ancient magic felt like. The textbooks were rewritten, the old stories became fairy tales, and the headmasters, bound by their oath to the Keepers, said nothing. Now we arrive at the 1990s, and the result. Harry Potter enters a world where ancient magic is a ghost. The only references are oblique. Dumbledore speaks of a power the Dark Lord knows not, and he calls it love. But love is not a spell. Love is not a wand movement. Love is the raw emotional force that ancient magic was always tied to. Dumbledore is not being poetic. He is describing the last remaining thread of a power that has gone underground. Love, sacrifice, courage. These are the only ways to touch ancient magic when the world is in recess, because those forces do not depend on the ambient magical field. They come from within, and that is the dark truth. The wizarding world did not lose ancient magic because it was destroyed. It lost ancient magic because the world needed a rest, and the people in power decided that the rest was more important than the truth. The headmasters of Hogwarts, from Phineas Nigellus Black to Albus Dumbledore, carried the weight of that secret. They watched as the old power faded, and they chose to let it go. But the recess does not last forever. Tides return. The question is not whether ancient magic will come back. The question is what will happen when it does. Because the traces are still there. The blue smoke still lingers in forgotten corners. The pain stored in silver liquid still waits beneath the earth, and somewhere in a vault that no one is supposed to find. The Keepers are watching. They are waiting for the moment when the world is ready to wake up. And that brings us to a power that never went dormant. A fire that does not need the world's permission to burn. We will explore that next in Chapter 15, The Dragon's Fire, because dragons have always known something and their secret is about to change everything. The previous chapter left us with a troubling question. If ancient magic went dormant, if the world's core power retreated into a long sleep between the 1890s and the 1990s, then what happened to the creatures that had already been touched by it? Because magic does not simply vanish without leaving a scar. And when that magic is ancient, when it is older than the very concept of wizardry, the creatures that absorb it are changed in ways that cannot be undone. Consider the dragon, a creature already fearsome, already capable of leveling a village with a single breath. In its natural state, a dragon is a marvel of biological magic. Its fire is not merely flame, but a chemical reaction catalyzed by a gland behind the brain. A gland that secretes a volatile substance that ignites upon contact with air. This is the accepted understanding, the explanation found in textbooks at Hogwarts, the one that makes the dragon a predictable, if dangerous, beast. But what happens when that gland is flooded with something older, something that does not obey the laws of conventional chemistry? Ancient magic augments the natural abilities of magical creatures in a way that modern spellwork cannot replicate. It does not add a new power on top of the existing one. It amplifies the core, it deepens the root. A dragon that has been exposed to ancient magic does not simply breathe fire. It breathes fire that burns with a blue-white intensity, fire that does not consume oxygen, fire that can persist underwater, fire that leaves no ash because it consumes the very concept of matter. The dragon becomes a living conduit for a force that predates the planet itself. Its scales, already nearly impenetrable, take on a shimmer that is not reflective but absorptive. drinking in light and sound until the creature moves through the world as a silent, invisible inferno. But this augmentation is not a gift, it is a corruption. In the late 19th century, a faction of wizards who had broken away from the ministry's oversight began conducting experiments. They had discovered traces of ancient magic in the highlands surrounding Hogwarts, traces that had been left behind by the keepers centuries before, and they believed that this residual power, this echo of a forgotten age, could be harvested and weaponized. Their target was the dragon, not because they wanted to understand the creature, but because they wanted to control it. They captured several specimens, young dragons taken from nests in the mountains of Romania and Wales, and they brought them to hidden laboratories carved into the rock beneath the Forbidden Forest. The experiments were brutal. The wizards injected raw, unrefined ancient magic directly into the dragon's bloodstream. They forced the creatures to inhale vapors drawn from corrupted ley lines. They carved runes into the dragon's hides, runes that glowed with a sickly green light, runes that pulsed in rhythm with a heartbeat that was not the dragon's own. The goal was to create a weapon, a beast that could level entire cities with a single breath, a beast that could not be killed by ordinary means. And in some ways they succeeded. The dragons that survived the process were no longer natural. Their fire burned with a heat that could melt stone. Their hides became resistant to even the most powerful stunning spells. They grew larger, faster, more aggressive, but they also became unstable. The ancient magic that had been forced into them did not integrate cleanly. It warred with the dragon's own innate magic, creating a constant state of internal conflict. The creatures were in pain, a pain that manifested as rage, a rage that could not be soothed. They would attack anything that moved, including their own handlers. The wizards lost control. One dragon, a particularly large specimen that had been subjected to multiple rounds of infusion, broke free from its restraints and escaped into the surrounding wilderness. It flew north toward the mountains, leaving a trail of scorched earth and shattered trees. The ministry sent a team of Aurors to track it, but they never found the body. They found only the aftermath. A valley that had been turned to glass, a lake that had been boiled dry, and the remains of a small Muggle village that had been erased from existence. The statute of secrecy was nearly broken that day. The ministry covered it up, of course, blaming the destruction on a volcanic eruption. But the truth was far more terrifying. A dragon fueled by ancient magic is a threat to the statute of secrecy, not because it is powerful, but because it is unpredictable. A normal dragon can be contained, studied, predicted. Its behavior follows patterns that have been documented for centuries. But a dragon that has been corrupted by ancient magic does not follow any pattern. It is a creature of chaos. Its fire can burn through the fabric of reality itself, creating rifts that allow muggles to glimpse the magical world. Its presence can distort the local environment, causing plants to grow at unnatural speeds, causing the weather to shift without warning, causing the very ground to tremble. It cannot be hidden. It cannot be explained away. And if it were to appear in a populated area, the entire wizarding world would be exposed. The experiments were eventually shut down. The wizards involved were arrested, their laboratories sealed, their research destroyed, but the damage had been done. The ancient magic that had been used to corrupt those dragons did not simply disappear. It lingered, seeping into the soil, infecting the water, waiting. And somewhere, deep in the mountains, the dragon is still out there. It is still burning. It is still waiting. This is the dark truth that the wizarding world refuses to acknowledge. Ancient magic is not a neutral force. It is not a tool to be used for convenience or power. It is a living thing, a consciousness that predates humanity, and it does not take kindly to being forced into a creature that was not meant to hold it. The dragons that survived those experiments are not weapons. They are warnings. They are reminders that the boundaries between worlds are thin, and that when you cross them, you do not always come back the same. And this brings us to the next chapter, Chapter 16, the emotional catalyst. Because the corruption of the dragons was not an accident. It was a symptom of something deeper, something that connects ancient magic to the most primal human experiences. And when we understand that connection, we will finally understand why the keepers sealed their knowledge away and why some doors should never be opened. The previous chapter left us standing at the edge of a dragon's lair, watching the embers of corrupted ancient magic smoulder in the eyes of beasts bred for war. We saw how that primordial force could twist the natural order, amplifying the fire within a creature until it became something monstrous, something beyond the control of even the most skilled handlers. But what we did not yet explore is the source of that amplification. The question that lingers like smoke after a wildfire is this: what exactly fuels ancient magic in the first place? The answer, as we are about to discover, lies not in the stars or in forgotten incantations, but in the very core of what it means to be alive. Modern magic, as taught at Hogwarts in the 1990s, is a clinical discipline. It is a system of precise wand movements, carefully enunciated syllables, and predictable outcomes. When a student learns to cast Lumos, they are not pouring their soul into the spell. They are simply channeling a standardized flow of energy through a focus. The result is reliable, replicable, and safe. It is the magic of the laboratory, of the textbook, of the examination hall. It is intellectual, it is controlled, and it is in many ways sterile. Ancient magic, by contrast, is anything but sterile. It is visceral. It does not respond to a well-practiced swish and flick. It responds to the raw, unfiltered states of human experience. Sorrow, courage, love, despair. These are not mere emotions in the context of ancient magic. They are keys. They are catalysts. They are the fuel that ignites a power far older than any wand core or incantation. And this is where the true danger begins to reveal itself. Consider the most famous example of ancient magic in the entire Harry Potter canon. It is not found in the halls of Hogwarts Legacy, nor in the whispers of the keepers. It is found in a graveyard in Godric's Hollow on a cold night in 1981. When Lily Potter stood between her son and Lord Voldemort, she did not cast a spell. She did not raise a wand. She simply loved. And that love, that willing sacrifice, triggered a form of ancient magic so profound that it rebounded the killing curse, shattered the Dark Lord's body, and left a scar on a baby's forehead that would become the most famous mark in wizarding history. That was not modern magic. That was something far deeper. That was the emotional catalyst in its purest, most devastating form. Now, let us study this phenomenon more closely. Sorrow, courage, and love are not just feelings, they are frequencies. They resonate with the fundamental fabric of reality in ways that modern magical theory has never fully understood. When a wizard experiences profound sorrow, their magical core does not simply feel sad. It vibrates, it opens, it becomes permeable to forces that lie beneath the surface of conventional spellwork. This is why the most powerful acts of ancient magic are often born from loss. A mother's grief for her child, a warrior's despair on a battlefield, a lover's heartbreak at the end of a long road. These are not weaknesses, they are conduits. Courage, too, plays a unique role. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to act in spite of it. And that decision, that deliberate defiance of the instinct to flee, creates a spike of magical energy that ancient magic can latch onto. Think of Harry Potter walking into the Forbidden Forest in the Deathly Hallows, knowing he was walking to his death. He was not casting a spell. He was not performing a ritual. He was simply choosing to face the end with his eyes open. And that act of courage, that willingness to sacrifice himself for his friends, activated the same ancient protection that his mother had invoked years before. It was not a spell, it was a state of being. Love, of course, is the most powerful of all, but it is not the love of a Hallmark card. It is not sentimental or soft. It is the love that burns, that endures, that refuses to let go even when the world says it should. It is the love that drives a parent to stand in front of a curse, It is the love that makes a friend dive into a frozen lake to save a drowning boy. It is the love that binds souls together across the veil of death. And ancient magic recognizes this love as a force of nature, as real and as tangible as gravity or electromagnetism. It is the fuel that powers the deepest spells. But here is the dark truth that the keepers of Hogwarts' legacy understood all too well. These emotional catalysts are not safe. They are not something to be toyed with. When a wizard opens themselves to the intensity of sorrow, courage, or love, in order to fuel ancient magic, they are walking a razor's edge. The same force that can protect a child from a killing curse can also consume the wizard who wields it. The danger of a wizard losing their mind to the intensity of these forces is not a theoretical possibility, it is a documented reality. In the late 19th century, there were accounts of wizards who attempted to harness ancient magic through deliberate emotional trauma. They would lock themselves in dark chambers, replaying their most painful memories over and over, trying to generate enough sorrow to fuel a spell. Some succeeded, but they did not remain sane. Their minds cracked under the weight of the very emotions they were trying to weaponize. They became hollow shells, their eyes empty, their voices reduced to whispers. They had touched something too raw, too powerful, and it had burned them from the inside out. The keepers knew this. That is why they built the repositories beneath Hogwarts. That is why they sealed away the most dangerous knowledge. They understood that ancient magic was not a tool to be mastered. It was a force to be respected and feared. It demanded a price that few were willing to pay, and those who did pay it often lost themselves in the transaction. Modern magic, with its careful rules and its safe boundaries, is a shield against this madness. It protects the wizard from the raw, unfiltered power of the universe. It says, "You do not need to feel the full weight of your grief to light a candle. You do not need to summon the courage of a dying soldier to open a door. You can simply say the words, move the wand, and let the spell do the work." That is the gift of the modern system, but it is also its limitation, because the spells that matter most, the spells that change the course of history, are never cast from a textbook. They are cast from the heart. And that brings us to the Pensieve. That stone basin, kept in the office of the headmaster, is not just a device for reviewing memories. It is a relic of an older understanding. It is a tool that allows a wizard to step into the emotional truth of another person's experience. When Harry enters the Pensieve, he is not just watching a recording. He is feeling the sorrow, the courage, the love that saturated those moments. He is immersing himself in the emotional catalyst that made those memories powerful enough to be preserved. The Pensieve is a bridge between the clinical magic of the modern world and the visceral magic of the ancients. And in the next chapter, we will step into that bridge. We will explore what happens when a wizard not only witnesses the past, but becomes part of it. We will look at the Pensieve Memories, and we will ask the question that the keepers themselves never fully answered. When you enter another person's memory, are you merely observing? Or are you awakening something that was never meant to be disturbed? We've just explored how sorrow, courage, and love act as the raw fuel for ancient magic, how the visceral power of emotion can reshape reality in ways that clinical spellwork never could. But if those emotions are the fuel, then what steers the engine? What decides whether that power is used to heal or to destroy? The answer lies not in the magic itself, but in the mind that wields it. And to understand that, we must turn to the Pensieve. The keepers of Hogwarts' legacy left behind a series of memories, stored in a Pensieve, that the protagonist must experience to prove themselves worthy of the final repository of ancient magic. On the surface, these trials appear to be tests of skill, knowledge, and bravery. But if you look closer, if you peel back the layers of what is actually being shown, a far more troubling question emerges. Were these trials really testing the ability to wield power? Or were they testing the restraint to never use it at all? Each memory is a window into a subjective version of history. The keepers were not neutral observers. They were wizards with their own biases, their own fears, and their own agendas. When they chose to preserve a specific moment in the Pensieve, they were not simply documenting the past, they were curating a narrative. They were deciding what version of events would be passed down to future generations, and that is a deeply dangerous act. Consider the trial of Percival Rackham. He shows you a memory of himself and his fellow keepers confronting the ancient magic that had been unleashed by the Goblin Rebellion. The memory is dramatic, filled with swirling blue energy, crumbling stone, and the roar of magical combat. But what is it really teaching you? It is teaching you that ancient magic is a force to be contained, to be sealed away, to be hidden from the world. Rackham's solution was not to understand the magic, or to use it wisely. His solution was to lock it up and throw away the key, and he presents this as the only responsible choice. But is that truly the lesson? Or is it the lesson that Rackham wanted you to learn? Because if you examine the memory closely, you notice something unsettling. The keepers are not just fighting the goblins, they are fighting the very idea that anyone else could ever be trusted with this power. They are protecting their own authority, their own monopoly, on a force they barely comprehend. The trial is not about proving that you are strong enough to handle ancient magic. It is about proving that you are willing to accept their judgment, to follow their rules, to never question the decision to bury this knowledge forever. And then there is the trial of Neam Fitzgerald. Her memory is perhaps the most revealing of all. She shows you a moment of profound personal loss, the death of her husband, and the way she used ancient magic to preserve his final moments. It is a beautiful, heartbreaking scene, but it is also a warning. She is showing you that ancient magic can be used to hold on to the past, to resist the natural flow of time, to defy death itself, and she is showing you the cost. The memory is tinged with sorrow, with the weight of a love that could not let go. She is not teaching you how to use the magic. She is teaching you why you should be afraid to use it. This is the hidden warning that modern wizards have ignored. The keepers did not leave behind instructions on how to wield ancient magic. They left behind a series of cautionary tales, each one designed to instill fear, to discourage exploration, to ensure that no one would ever repeat their mistakes. But in doing so, they also ensured that no one would ever truly understand what they were dealing with. The knowledge was buried so deep that it became myth, and myth became legend, and legend became something that people no longer believed in. By the late 19th century, ancient magic was already considered a forgotten discipline. The wizarding world had moved on. They had built a system of spellcasting that was safe, predictable, and controllable. They had traded the raw, visceral power of ancient magic for the comfort of standardized incantations, and they had convinced themselves that this was progress. But what they had really done was lose touch with the very foundation of their own power. The Pensieve Memories are a mirror. They reflect not just the past, but the present. They show us that history is not a fixed record of events. It is a story told by the victors, by the survivors, by those who had the power to decide what would be remembered and what would be forgotten. The keepers chose to remember their fear. They chose to remember their caution. They chose to remember the moments when they closed the door, rather than the moments when they opened it. And that is the dark truth that lingers beneath the surface of these trials. The keepers were not heroes. They were gatekeepers. They were wizards who saw something they could not control and decided that the only safe option was to hide it away. They left behind a legacy of fear, not of understanding. And when the protagonist of Hogwarts' legacy finally reaches the repository, they are faced with a choice that the keepers never wanted anyone to have. Do you open the door, or do you seal it forever? The answer to that question is not found in the memories. It is found in the heart of the one who watches them. Because the trials were never really about the magic. They were about the wielder. They were about whether you had the wisdom to know when to use power and the strength to know when to walk away. And that is a lesson that cannot be taught through spells or incantations. It can only be learned through experience, through loss, through the kind of sorrow that Nyama Fitzgerald knew all too well. So as you drift off to sleep tonight, consider this. The keepers left their warnings in the Pensieve, but they also left their doubts. They were not certain that they had made the right choice. They were not certain that burying the magic was the answer. They were simply afraid. And that fear has echoed down through the centuries, shaping the wizarding world in ways that no one fully understands. In the next chapter, we will explore the dark arts parallel and how the same fear that drove the keepers to hide ancient magic also drove others to corrupt it, to twist it into something far more sinister. Because the line between restraint and suppression is thinner than most wizards care to admit, and the shadows of that choice still linger in the halls of Hogwarts. The Keeper's trials were never about raw power. That much became clear as we sat with the memories of Percival Rackham, Charles Rookwood, and the others. They weren't testing whether you could cast a spell faster or more destructively than your peers. They were testing restraint, the ability to stand at the precipice of absolute power and choose not to leap. And yet, for all their wisdom, the Keepers left a dangerous gap in their teachings. They told us what not to do, but they never fully explained why the forbidden path was so seductive in the first place. They never named the shadow that ancient magic casts when it falls into the wrong hands. That shadow has a name, and it is the dark arts. To understand the parallel between ancient magic and the dark arts, we have to strip away the moralizing that the wizarding world layers over both. In the late 19th century, the Ministry of Magic had already codified 3 spells as unforgivable: the Imperious Curse, the Cruciatus Curse, and the Killing Curse. They were deemed irredeemable because they robbed the victim of agency, inflicted unbearable pain, or extinguished life entirely. But here is the uncomfortable truth that the Keepers understood, and that the Ministry refused to acknowledge. Ancient magic can do all of those things, and more, without ever needing to utter a single incantation. It is not the spell that makes a thing dark, it is the intent, and the willingness to let the power consume you. Let us compare the unforgivable nature of ancient magic to the dark arts directly. The Killing Curse requires a specific wand movement, a clear pronunciation, and a cold, ruthless desire to end a life. It is a focused act of murder. Ancient magic, on the other hand, can unravel a person's existence without any visible gesture. When Isadora Morganach extracted the pain from her father, she did not kill him, she hollowed him out. She left a walking shell that felt nothing, cared for nothing, and eventually withered into a state that was worse than death. That is not a curse you can block with a shield charm. That is a fundamental violation of the soul, achieved through a power the victim cannot even perceive. The Killing Curse is a bullet. Ancient magic twisted by grief is a slow poison that convinces you it is medicine. This is why ancient magic is technically grey, but easily corrupted by the user's intent. It has no inherent morality, the same force that can seal a vault for centuries, protecting a dangerous secret from those who would misuse it, can also be used to tear open the mind of a loved one and reshape their emotions. The magic itself does not care. It is a neutral current, like a river that can irrigate a field or drown a village. The corruption comes from the wizard who stands at the riverbank and decides that their pain, their loss, their desperation justifies the flood. Isadora believed she was healing. She believed she was offering a gift, and the ancient magic did not argue with her. It simply obeyed. That obedience is the most dangerous quality of ancient magic. Modern spellcasting requires discipline. You have to learn the theory, practice the movements, and channel your will through a wand. There are safeguards built into the system. A student who tries to cast the Cruciatus Curse in a classroom will fail because they lack the genuine malice required. But ancient magic does not require malice. It requires emotion. An emotion, unlike malice, can be justified. A grieving daughter, a betrayed lover, a desperate parent. They all have reasons, and the ancient magic listens to the reason, not the consequence. That is how a healer becomes a monster without ever realizing she has crossed a line. The physical transformation of those who consume ancient magical traces is the most visible evidence of this corruption. We have seen it in the goblins who wielded ancient magic artifacts during the rebellions. We have seen it in the wizards who tried to hoard the power for themselves. The traces leave marks, not just on the environment, with those swirling blue remnants that scar the landscape, but on the body itself. Consuming ancient magic, drawing it directly into your core without the filter of a wand or a spell structure, changes you at a cellular level. The eyes may take on a faint luminescence. The skin can develop a pallor that seems to glow from within. There are accounts from the late medieval period of a warlock who attempted to drink from a spring of concentrated ancient magic. He emerged with veins that pulsed with silver light, and he lived for over 2 centuries, but he could no longer feel warmth. He could not taste food. He could not cry. He had traded his humanity for a power that slowly calcified his soul. The keepers understood this transformation intimately. That is why they sealed the repositories. They had seen what happened to those who tried to absorb the traces directly. The power does not just augment your abilities, it rewrites your fundamental nature. You become a vessel for something that was never meant to be contained, and the more you take, the more you need. It is an addiction that masquerades as enlightenment. Isadora thought she was becoming a better healer. In truth, she was becoming a parasite, feeding on the pain of others to sustain her own fractured sense of purpose. The parallel to the dark arts becomes even more unsettling when we consider the concept of the Horcrux. Both practices involve a willingness to sacrifice something essential for power. The Horcrux requires murder and a deliberate splitting of the soul. The consumption of ancient magic requires the gradual erosion of empathy, the numbing of moral instinct, and the acceptance that the end justifies any means. Neither path can be walked halfway. You either resist the temptation entirely, or you fall completely. There is no middle ground where you use just a little ancient magic for a good cause and remain unchanged. This is the dark truth that the keepers tried to bury along with the repositories. Ancient magic is not evil, but it is amoral, and amorality in the hands of a grieving or ambitious wizard is far more dangerous than outright evil. Evil you can recognize, you can fight it, you can rally against it, but a grey power that whispers that your pain matters more than the rules, that your loss justifies any action, that you are special enough to wield it responsibly. That is the seduction that has no counter-curse. And so the question that the keepers left for us is not whether we have the power to use ancient magic, it is whether we have the wisdom to leave it alone. Because once you consume the traces, once you let that silver light into your blood, you are no longer the person who made the choice. The magic begins to make choices for you, and the person you become may not recognize the face in the mirror, even as the veins glow brighter with every secret you unlock. That is the warning that echoes through the map chamber, through the portraits of the keepers, through the very stones of Hogwarts itself. The castle was built to contain this power, not to celebrate it, and the deepest secrets of that chamber have not yet been spoken aloud. We ended the last chapter standing at a moral precipice, staring into the grey abyss of ancient magic. We saw how easily a force of creation can be twisted by intent, how the same power that can heal a dying world can also shatter it. But what happens when that power is not wielded by a single wizard, but is instead engineered into the very stones of a castle? What happens when a chamber is built not to be a room, but to be a heart, pumping the lifeblood of ancient magic through the veins of the entire magical world? This is where we descend into the map chamber. And the first thing you must understand is that it is not a room, it is a machine of staggering, terrifying complexity. The keepers did not simply find a cave and paint some runes on the walls. They designed and constructed the most intricate ancient magic construct ever built by mortal hands. We are not talking about a spell you cast and forget. We are talking about a permanent, living enchantment that requires constant, silent, invisible maintenance. Think of the chamber as a kind of magical observatory, but instead of watching stars, it watches the health of the magical world itself. The great circular floor, with its map of the known wizarding world, is not just a decoration, it is a diagnostic screen. Every glowing dot, every faint line of light, every shimmering node on that map represents a ley line, a nexus of power, a place where the world's magic pools and flows. The chamber monitors these flows. It reads the pulse of the planet. It can detect when a magical wellspring is running dry, when a ley line is being corrupted, or when a surge of dark energy is building beneath the surface. The engineering behind this is almost impossible to comprehend. The keepers had to weave ancient magic into the very foundations of Hogwarts, tapping into the castle's own deep magic, which itself was built on an even older network of natural power. They created a feedback loop. The chamber draws power from the world, uses that power to monitor the world, and then, if necessary, can push power back into the world to heal a wound. It is a circulatory system for the planet's magical lifeblood, and at the center of it all, there is the repository, a vault designed to hold the raw, untamed essence of ancient magic itself, a reserve tank of pure power that the keepers could draw upon in times of crisis. But here is the terrifying realization that the keepers themselves never fully faced. The chamber is failing. In the modern era, it is not just dormant, it is decaying. The magical world of the 20th century is not the same world for which the chamber was built. The ley lines have shifted. The ancient wells have been tapped dry by centuries of careless spellcasting. The very nature of magic itself has changed, becoming more clinical, more rigid, more intellectual. The chamber was designed for a world of raw, emotional, visceral power. It was built to handle the floods and storms of a primordial force. But the modern world is a trickle, a controlled, regulated stream. The chamber is like a massive heart designed to pump an ocean of blood, but it is now only receiving a few cups of water. The great map on the floor flickers, the nodes dim. The connections between ley lines grow faint and brittle. The keepers could not have foreseen this. They could not have predicted that the very world they were trying to protect would slowly starve their greatest creation. The chamber is not broken, it is starving, and a starving heart does not simply stop. It begins to fail in unpredictable, dangerous ways. It can misinterpret a faint signal as a catastrophic wound. It can try to flood a healthy ley line with power, thinking it is healing a rupture, when in reality it is causing a magical aneurysm. The chamber is becoming a liability, a sleeping giant that is having bad dreams. And the worst part is, no one is awake to interpret its readings. No one is there to read the map, to see the flickering lights, to understand that the health of the magical world is not being monitored anymore. It is being misdiagnosed. This is the secret of the map chamber. It is not a tomb of forgotten knowledge. It is an emergency room with no doctor, a control room with no operator, a heart that is beating out of sync with the body it was meant to sustain. And as we stand on the precipice of the next chapter, we must ask ourselves a question that the keepers never dared to answer. If the chamber is failing, if its silent guardians are no longer watching, then what is? What happens when the last line of defense against a world's magical decay is left to rot in the dark? The answer lies not in the chamber itself, but in the shadows that have begun to gather just outside its doors. The answer lies with the silent guardians. I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. The map chamber is a marvel of engineering, but it is not the only ancient construct that has survived the centuries. In fact, the very grounds of Hogwarts and the forgotten corners of the magical world are patrolled by something far more unsettling. They stand motionless for decades, for centuries, never eating, never sleeping, never aging. They are the silent guardians, the stone sentinels that protect ancient magic sites, and their existence raises a question that few wizards have ever dared to ask. What animates? What keeps them standing watch long after their creators have turned to dust? To understand the stone sentinels, you must first understand the nature of the magic that built them. Modern animation spells, like the one that brings a chess piece to life or makes a suit of armor salute a passing prefect, are temporary. They require a constant thread of magical energy from the caster, or they fade. A suit of armor animated by a 7th-year student will fall still the moment the student leaves the room. But the guardians of ancient magic sites are different. They do not fade. They do not tire. They have stood in the same position for hundreds of years, their stone eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting for something that may never come. This is not animation. This is something far older. This is the lost art of the Pensieve Centuries. The term Pensieve Century is not a formal classification found in any textbook. It is a name given by the few scholars who have studied these constructs, a reference to the way their magic resembles the memory storage properties of a pensieve. You see, a pensieve does not generate its own power. It is a vessel. It holds a strand of memory, a piece of a living mind, suspended in a state of perfect preservation. The stone sentinels operate on the same principle. They are not animated by a spell that must be constantly renewed. They are animated by a fragment of a soul, or at least a fragment of a consciousness that was placed inside them at the moment of their creation. This is the technology of the Pensieve Centuries, as a lost art of animation, a technique that blurs the line between enchantment and necromancy. Imagine the process. A keeper, or some ancient wizard of similar power, would stand before a block of unhewn stone. They would not carve it with tools. They would not shape it with a levitation charm. They would place their hand upon its surface and pour a piece of themselves into it. Not their entire soul, not in the way a Horcrux is made, but a sliver of their intent, a shard of their will, a fragment of their purpose. The stone would absorb this essence and become something more than rock. It would become a vessel for a single, unwavering command. Guard this place. Protect this site. Do not let anyone unworthy pass. And then the wizard would walk away, leaving the sentinel to its eternal vigil. The stone sentinels that guard ancient magic sites are not mindless. They are not simple golems that follow a pre-programmed path. They possess a form of awareness, a dim but persistent consciousness that allows them to judge intent. A student wandering into a restricted corridor might be ignored, dismissed as harmless. But a wizard carrying a dark artifact, or a poacher seeking to plunder a forgotten vault, will find the sentinel awakening. The stone grinds. The eyes, which were once blank, ignite with a pale blue light. The guardian steps forward, and its presence is enough to make the air grow heavy. It does not speak. It does not threaten. It simply moves to block your path, and you understand, with a certainty that bypasses logic, that you will not get past it. How these constructs operate for centuries without a power source is a question that has baffled magical theorists for generations. The answer, as with so much of ancient magic, lies in the nature of the magic itself. Modern spells are like a fire. They burn fuel, the wizard's own magical reserves, and they go out when the fuel is consumed. But the magic that animates a stone sentinel is more like a river. It does not burn, it flows. The sentinel is connected to the earth beneath it, to the ley lines that crisscross the magical world, to the ambient magic that seeps out of ancient sites, like Hogwarts itself. It draws its power from the environment, not from a caster. It is a sponge, slowly absorbing the magical energy that surrounds it, and using that energy to sustain its own existence. This is why the sentinels are always found near places of great magical significance. They cannot exist in a mundane environment. They need the constant, low-level hum of ancient magic to survive. But there is a darker implication to this design. If a sentinel draws its power from the environment, then it is also affecting that environment. Every moment it stands watch is siphoning a tiny amount of magical energy from the soil, the air, the very stones of the castle. Over centuries, this drain becomes significant. The area around a sentinel can become magically depleted, a dead zone where spells are harder to cast and magical creatures are reluctant to venture. This is one of the reasons why the Keepers were so concerned about the environmental impact of ancient magic. They understood that every construct, every ward, every protective enchantment came with a cost. The stone sentinels are not free. They are a tax on the land, a slow, silent extraction of the world's magical vitality. The technology of the Pensieve Sentries, as a lost art of animation, is a tragedy of knowledge. The method for creating these guardians was never written down. It was passed from master to apprentice, taught in whisper and demonstrated in secret. When the last of the ancient wizards died, the technique died with them. The sentinels that remain are relics, irreplaceable artifacts of a forgotten age. No modern wizard could create a new one. They can only maintain the old ones, and even that is a challenge. The sentinels are not immune to decay. The fragment of consciousness within them can grow distorted over time. A guardian that was programmed to protect a site might begin to interpret all visitors as threats. It might expand its definition of unworthy until it includes everyone. There are stories, whispered in the halls of the ministry, of ancient sites that have become completely inaccessible because their sentinels have gone mad, standing eternal watch over nothing, attacking anyone who draws near. The stone sentinels that guard ancient magic sites are a reminder of a time when magic was not a tool but a covenant. The wizards who built them did not see themselves as masters of the natural world. They saw themselves as stewards, guardians of a power that was not theirs to exploit. They built the sentinels to protect that power, to ensure that it would not be misused, to keep it safe until a worthy successor might come. But the successors never came. The knowledge faded, the keepers died, and the sentinels remained, standing alone in the darkness, waiting for a command that will never be given. This brings us to a question that the keepers themselves must have faced. If the sentinels are draining the land, if they are slowly consuming the very magic they were built to protect, then what happens when the land is empty? What happens when the ancient magic sites are nothing but hollow shells? Their power exhausted by centuries of guardianship? The answer is not a pleasant one. The sentinels will not simply stop. They will continue to draw power, even when there is none left. They will begin to draw on the magic of living things, on the wizards who approach them, on the creatures that wander too close. A starving sentinel is a dangerous thing. It is a predator, a trap, a monument to the hubris of its creators. The next time you walk through the corridors of Hogwarts, pay attention to the statues. Look at the suits of armor. Notice the gargoyles that perch on the battlements. Most of them are harmless, simple decorations animated by minor spells. But some of them are older. Some of them have been standing in the same spot for 1,000 years. And some of them are watching you. They are the silent guardians. And they have not forgotten their purpose. They are waiting, and they will continue to wait. Long after the castle has crumbled to dust. Long after the last wizard has spoken the last spell. Long after the world has forgotten that magic ever existed, they will stand, and they will guard, and they will never, ever rest. This relentless consumption of the world's magic, this slow bleed of vitality into constructs that were meant to protect it, is a problem that cannot be ignored forever. The ancient magic sites are not infinite. They are reservoirs, and every sentinel is a tap. The question is not whether the reservoirs will run dry. The question is what happens when they do. And that is a question that leads us directly into our next chapter, where we will examine the scars left behind by ancient magic, the places where the land itself has been wounded, and the desperate measures that the keepers took to contain the damage. The silent guardians are only the beginning. The true cost of ancient magic is far more terrifying, and it is written into the very ground beneath our feet. The stone sentinels we explored in the last chapter stand as eternal witnesses to a truth the wizarding world has tried to forget. They guard something far more dangerous than treasure or knowledge. They guard the wounds in the earth itself. For when ancient magic is used, when it is drawn up from the deep places of the world and shaped by will, it does not simply vanish after the spell is complete. It leaks. It seeps into the soil, into the water, into the very air, and it changes everything it touches. Consider what it means for a force as old as the planet to be unleashed in a single moment. Modern spellcasting is like a candle flame, contained, controlled, extinguished when no longer needed. But ancient magic is more like a volcanic eruption. It does not stop when the caster stops. The energy continues to radiate outward, settling into the environment like a slow poison or a strange fertilizer, depending on how you choose to see it. And the places where this magic has been used most heavily, the battlefields, the ritual sites, the hidden chambers, they all bear the scars of this contamination. The most visible example of this phenomenon is the Forbidden Forest itself. It is easy to think of it as simply an old forest, dark and dangerous. But its origins are far stranger than most students ever learn. The forest did not always exist in its current form. In the earliest records of Hogwarts, the area was described as open woodland, manageable, even pleasant. But something changed. Something caused the trees to grow twisted and aggressive, the undergrowth to become impenetrable, and the creatures within to evolve into something far more hostile than their natural counterparts. The truth is that the Forbidden Forest grew where ancient magic pooled. The founders of Hogwarts, particularly Godric Gryffindor and Salazar Slytherin, were known to have conducted some of their most powerful rituals in that area. They chose it because the natural magical ley lines were strongest there, but they did not anticipate the long-term consequences. Every spell they cast, every enchantment they laid, every battle they fought within those woods left a residue, and over centuries, that residue accumulated. The trees themselves began to absorb this ambient magic. They grew faster, taller, and more sentient than ordinary trees. The Whomping Willow, though planted much later, is only the most famous example of what happens when a plant is exposed to concentrated ancient magic. But the forest is filled with similar anomalies. Trees that move when no one is watching, groves where the air hums with an unidentifiable energy, clearings where time seems to pass differently. These are not natural phenomena. They are the symptoms of a landscape that has been saturated with power it was never meant to hold. And then there are the beasts. The creatures of the Forbidden Forest are not merely wild, they are warped. The acromantulas, for example, are not native to the British Isles. They were introduced, yes, but they thrived in the forest because the magical residue there accelerated their growth and aggression. The same can be said for the centaurs. Though they would never admit it, the centaurs are drawn to the forest because they can feel the ancient magic in the soil, the stars, the very roots of the trees. It is why they are so protective of their territory. They understand that the forest is not just a place. It is a living repository of power that has been leaking into the world for 1,000 years. But the most disturbing evidence of this environmental scarring is found not in the forest, but on the battlefields where great magical conflicts occurred. Take the site of the Battle of Hogwarts, for instance. Even before that final confrontation, the grounds around the castle were marked by centuries of magical warfare. The clearing where Harry Potter faced Voldemort is not just a patch of grass. It is a place where the veil between life and death is thinner, where the air feels heavier, where those sensitive to magic can still feel the echoes of the spells that were cast there. These battlefields become permanent scars on the landscape. The grass may grow back, the walls may be rebuilt, but the magic that was unleashed does not simply disappear. It sinks into the earth, creating hotspots where the natural order is disrupted. Animals born in these areas are often born with strange abilities or deformities. Plants bloom out of season or refuse to bloom at all. The very geometry of the land can shift, creating paths that loop back on themselves, or clearings that appear and disappear at random. The keepers understood this danger better than anyone. That is why they were so cautious about allowing the use of ancient magic They had seen what happened when it was used recklessly. They had watched forests grow sentient and beasts become monsters. They knew that every spell cast with this power was a debt owed to the earth, and that debt would eventually be collected. And yet the temptation to use it remains, because ancient magic is not just powerful, it is addictive. Once you have felt the world bending to your will, once you have seen what it can do, it is almost impossible to go back to ordinary spellcasting. The keepers themselves struggled with this. They had to build the map chamber, had to create the silent guardians, had to seal themselves away, just to resist the pull of the power they had discovered. The Forbidden Forest is a warning. It is a monument to what happens when magic is allowed to run wild. When the boundaries between the natural and the supernatural are blurred beyond repair. Every twisted tree, every aggressive creature, every strange light that flickers between the trunks at night is a reminder that ancient magic does not forgive. It does not forget. It only accumulates, waiting for the next fool to draw upon it. And that is the dark truth that the wizarding world refuses to face. The very ground beneath Hogwarts is saturated with this leaking power. The castle itself is built on a foundation of ancient magic, and that foundation is cracking. The keepers knew it. The founders knew it. And now, as we prepare to examine the tools we use to channel this power, we must ask ourselves a question that has no easy answer. When we pick up a wand and draw upon the source, are we controlling the magic, or is the magic controlling us? That is the question we will confront in our next chapter, the wand versus the source. We ended the last chapter standing at the edge of the Forbidden Forest, staring into a place where the very soil hums with a power that has no business being there. We talked about how leaking ancient magic warps ecosystems, how it twists creatures into something they were never meant to be. But that raises a question we have to face head-on tonight. If ancient magic is so dangerous, so volatile, why would anyone ever choose to use it? Why would the keepers, who were supposed to be guardians of balance, build an entire system around channeling this force? The answer is not what you think. It is not that ancient magic is more powerful, though it certainly can be. It is that the wand, the tool every wizard taught to revere from the moment they first step into Ollivanders, is not a source of power at all. It is a cage. Let us set the stage for a proper, technical comparison, because this is where the entire wizarding world has been operating under a fundamental misunderstanding for centuries. When a wizard casts a spell with a wand, they are not drawing magic from the air around them. They are not pulling from some deep well of universal energy. They are using the wand as a conduit for their own internal magical core, their own innate power. The wand focuses that energy, shapes it, and forces it through a very narrow channel. Think of it like a garden hose with a spray nozzle. The water is your magic. The wand is the nozzle. You can twist it to create a fine mist or a sharp jet, but you can never, ever release the full force of the water main. The wand is a limiter by design. It was invented, or perhaps discovered, to make magic safe. Safe for the caster, safe for the target, safe for the world around them. But raw environmental magic, the kind that the keepers learn to perceive, and the kind that swirls in blue smoke-like traces around ancient ruins, is the water main itself. It is the source. It does not come from within a wizard. It comes from the earth, from the stones, from the very fabric of reality. When a wizard taps into this power without a wand, they are no longer using a nozzle. They are cracking open the pipe. They are letting the full pressure of something ancient and indifferent flood through them. And this is where the fear begins. The fear that a wizard without a wand is more powerful than one with it is not just a paranoid theory whispered in dark corners. It is a cold, hard fact that the Ministry of Magic has spent centuries trying to suppress. Consider what a wand actually does. It imposes order. Every spell has a specific incantation, a specific movement, a specific intent. The wand enforces that structure. It says, "You will produce a jet of red light, and you will not accidentally tear a hole in the fabric of space." But raw environmental magic has no such structure. It is primordial. It responds to emotion, to will, to the sheer force of a wizard's desire. When a wizard channels this magic directly, they are not casting a spell. They are commanding reality to bend. And reality, it turns out, is very willing to listen. The problem is that reality does not care about consequences. It does not care about safety. It only cares about the command. This is why the keepers were so terrified. They had seen what happens when a wizard with a strong will and no wand decides to reshape the world around them. They had seen the traces left behind, the scars in the environment that never fully heal. They had seen the mutated beasts, the warped ecosystems, the places where the magic leaked out and kept on working long after the wizard was gone. The wand, for all its limitations, is a safety valve. It ensures that magic is always filtered through a human-designed system of rules and limits. It ensures that a wizard cannot accidentally or intentionally unleash a force that they cannot control. But here is the dark truth that the wizarding world refuses to acknowledge. The wand is not a gift, it is a leash. Every wizard is born with the potential to reach the source, to touch the raw magic that flows beneath the surface of the world. But from the very first lesson at Hogwarts, they are taught to reach for the wand instead. They are taught that the wand is the only way. They are taught that magic without a wand is weak, unreliable, and dangerous. And all of that is true, but only because the wizarding world has deliberately forgotten how to use it safely. The knowledge of how to channel raw environmental magic without destroying yourself or the world around you has been lost, hidden, or destroyed. The keepers knew this. They built the map chamber not as a monument to their power, but as a warning. They knew that the protagonist of the late 19th century, the one who could perceive the blue traces, was a threat, not because they were evil, but because they were powerful, in a way that the wizarding world was no longer equipped to handle. The keepers did not test for skill, they tested for restraint. They wanted to know if the protagonist could hold back, could refuse to use the full force of the source, could keep the leash on, even when the leash was an illusion. And this brings us to the most unsettling implication of all. If the wand is a limiter, then every wizard who has ever lived has been operating at a fraction of their true potential. Every great duel, every legendary spell, every moment of magical history has been a shadow of what could have been. The wizarding world has built its entire civilization on a foundation of safety, of control, of limitation, and they have done it because they are afraid. They are afraid of what a wizard without a wand could do. They are afraid of the source. They are afraid of the power that sleeps beneath Hogwarts, waiting for someone brave enough or foolish enough to reach for it without a filter. So when we look at the protagonist of the Hogwarts Legacy era, the one who walks through the ancient magic hotspots and feels the power humming in their bones, we have to ask a different question. Not whether they will use that power for good or evil, but whether they will have the strength to leave it untouched. Because the wand is not the source of magic. It never was. The wand is the wall we built between ourselves and the abyss. And the abyss, as it turns out, is always listening. That is the weight that will follow us into the next chapter. Because the story of the protagonist is not just about what they did with ancient magic. It is about what that power did to them. It is about the legacy they left behind. A legacy that the wizarding world is still trying to understand. And that is exactly where we are headed next. Into chapter 23, the legacy of the protagonist, where we will finally see what happens when a wizard touches the source and decides, for better or worse, to never let go. We ended the last chapter with a startling realization. The wand, that iconic tool of the wizarding world, was actually a limiter. It was a safety device designed to keep magic channeled, controlled, predictable. Modern spellcasting, with its precise incantations and rigid movements, created a civilized magical society, but at a cost. It cut off the vast majority of witches and wizards from the raw, untamed current that flowed beneath their everyday spells. Only a handful of people in any generation could sense that deeper current, those blue, smoke-like traces that whispered of a power far older than Hogwarts itself. But what happened to those rare individuals? Where did they go? And why did their kind seem to vanish from history? The official record is almost silent. By the late 19th century, the ability to perceive ancient magic was already considered a forgotten art, a relic of a bygone age. The few who possessed it were often misunderstood, feared or quietly tucked away. In the game of Hogwarts Legacy, we meet a protagonist who stumbles into this hidden world almost by accident. The keepers, who had guarded the secrets of ancient magic for centuries, were already a dying breed. They trained the last of their kind, then faded into legend. But the bloodline did not end there. There is a compelling theory that the sensitivity to ancient magic is not a random gift, but an inherited trait, a dormant gene carried silently through generations of wizarding families. Think about it. The ability to see blue traces, to feel the resonance of primordial spells, to tap into the very foundations of reality without a wand. That is not something you learn. It is something you are born with. And if it is genetic, then it can be passed down, hidden, diluted, but never truly erased. For every family that lost the ability through intermarriage or neglect, there is another, where it flickers back to life in a single child, unbeknownst to everyone, including the child themselves. Now, consider the Potter line. The Potters are an old family, but not particularly distinguished in the lore of ancient magic. Yet look closely at Harry Potter. He was not just an ordinary boy who survived a killing curse. That survival was, in itself, an act of ancient magic. The most powerful force in the wizarding world, according to Dumbledore. Lily Potter's sacrifice was a voluntary, selfless act that invoked a protection older than the dark arts. That protection created a conduit, a tether, between Harry and the magic that underpins reality itself. Could Harry have been an unwitting conduit of ancient magic his entire life? The signs are there. He could speak Parseltongue, a language that is not taught but inherited, a dialect that may have roots in the primordial magic of serpents in the earth. He could resist the imperious curse with remarkable ease, as if his will was anchored to something deeper than his own mind. He could see thestrals, creatures tied to death, and the veil, a vision that is sometimes linked to a sensitivity beyond normal sight. And his scar, that strange sentient mark, acted not just as a curse but as a beacon, a portal through which Voldemort's emotions and thoughts could flow. It was a direct connection to the ancient magic of souls. Perhaps the most telling detail is the way Harry's magic manifested as a child. He did not use a wand. He made glass vanish at the zoo. He regrew his hair overnight. He blew up his Aunt Marge. These were not controlled spells, but raw, emotional outpourings of a force that had no outlet. That is exactly how ancient magic behaves. It responds to extreme emotion, to love and fear and desperation, without the need for a formal casting. The wand, when he finally received one, actually channeled that power into a safer, more disciplined stream. But the source was always there, pulsing just beneath his skin. So the question becomes, if Harry was a descendant of those rare individuals who could see the blue traces, what happened to the rest of his bloodline? The truth is, they never disappeared. They simply went underground. They married into other families, their children inheriting a weaker version of the gift, and then a weaker one still. But the genetic code never vanished. Every few generations, a child is born who can see the traces, who hears the whispers, who feels the pull of places like the map chamber, and the ministry, which has always been wary of anything it cannot control, has a long history of covering up such anomalies, of quietly reassigning those children, of pretending that the ancient magic does not exist. It is a story of secrets, redacted files, and a cover-up that reaches into the highest offices of magical government. We know that the bloodline of those who could see the blue traces did not simply vanish. They were absorbed, hidden, and in some cases systematically erased. But the question that follows is perhaps even more unsettling. Who did the erasing, and why did they work so hard to bury the truth about the Keepers and their ancient magic? The answer lies in the heart of the British Ministry of Magic, in a department that few ever speak of and even fewer have seen, the Department of Mysteries. We know it from the later years as a place of prophecy forbes and time turners, but its deepest archives contain something far older, files that are not catalogued in any standard registry, files that refer to a single chilling designation, the 1890s anomaly. This is not a term that appears in any history book. It is a classified label, applied retroactively by ministry officials who were tasked with cleaning up the aftermath of the Keeper's final stand. The anomaly was not a single event. It was a pattern, a series of magical disturbances that registered on ancient detection networks that the ministry itself did not fully understand. These disturbances were not random. They were the echoes of ancient magic being used, contained, and in some cases, unleashed. The files describe locations where the very fabric of reality seemed to thin, where the blue traces were so dense that they could be seen by ordinary witches and wizards, not just the rare few, and where artifacts, objects imbued with the Keeper's power, were found lying in the open, waiting to be discovered. The ministry's response was swift and brutal. They did not study these artifacts. They did not try to understand the ancient magic that pulsed within them. They destroyed them, systematically, methodically, one by one. The relics of the Keepers were rounded up and shattered, melted, or otherwise rendered inert. The official reasoning, buried deep in those classified files, was that these objects were too dangerous to exist. They were unstable. They could cause harm to anyone who touched them. But that was a lie. The real reason was far more pragmatic. The ministry understood that ancient magic was not a tool that could be controlled. It was a force that demanded responsibility. And the wizarding world, in its rush to build a stable modern society, had chosen safety over power. They had chosen mediocrity over greatness. Think about that for a moment. The wizarding world, as we know it, is built on the foundation of the wand. A wand is a limiter. It channels magic through a controlled, predictable framework. It makes magic safe. It makes it teachable. It makes it ordinary. But ancient magic is none of those things. It is wild. It is unpredictable. And it is deeply, fundamentally tied to the world itself. The Keepers understood this. They knew that ancient magic could not be weaponized or commodified. It had to be respected. It had to be guarded. And when they realized that the wider wizarding world was not ready for that responsibility, they made a choice. They sealed the knowledge away. They hid the artifacts. And they trusted that one day, someone would come who could see the blue traces and carry that burden. But the ministry did not trust that plan. They saw the Keepers as a threat, not because the Keepers were malicious, but because their existence challenged the ministry's authority. If ancient magic was real, if it could be harnessed by a select few, then the entire structure of magical education and governance was built on a lie. The ministry could not allow that. So they buried the evidence. They rewrote the history. They destroyed the artifacts. And they created a narrative that ancient magic was a myth, a legend, a thing of the past. The 1890s anomaly was not an event to be studied. It was a problem to be solved, and the solution was silence. But silence does not destroy truth, it only hides it. And sometimes, the truth finds a way to leak through the cracks. The artifacts that were not destroyed were locked away in vaults so deep that even the most senior ministry officials forgot they existed. Some were hidden in plain sight, disguised as ordinary objects in museums or private collections. Others were buried beneath the foundations of Hogwarts itself, where the castle's own ancient magic masked their presence. And then there were the traces, the environmental scars left behind by the Keeper's work. The ministry tried to contain these as well. They erected barriers. They cast concealment charms. They declared certain areas off limits, claiming they were unstable or dangerous. But the truth was simpler. Those places were reminders of a power that the wizarding world had chosen to abandon. The Forbidden Forest is one such place. Its twisted trees and mutated creatures are not natural. They are the result of ancient magic leaking into the soil, warping the ecosystem over centuries. The Ministry knows this. They have files on it, but they will never admit it. Because to admit that the forest is a living artifact of ancient magic would be to admit that their cover-up has failed. And what of the bloodline? The descendants of those who could see the blue traces. The Ministry did not destroy them. They could not. But they did watch them. They monitored their families. They made sure that no one with that gift ever rose to power. They quietly steered them away from positions of influence, and ensuring that the secret of ancient magic remained buried. But the bloodline did not die out. It persisted, hidden, waiting. And in the late 19th century, it surfaced again. A student at Hogwarts who could see what others could not. A student who walked the same halls as the keepers and felt the same pull toward the ancient magic that pulsed beneath the castle. The Ministry panicked. They tried to intervene. They sent agents to observe, to contain, to redirect. But they failed. That student, the protagonist of the Hogwarts legacy story, did what the keepers had hoped. They unlocked the secrets. They faced the trials. And they made a choice. But what the Ministry did not anticipate was that the protagonist's actions would leave a mark, a permanent record, a trace that could not be erased. The 1890s anomaly was not just a series of events. It was a signature, a fingerprint in the magical fabric of reality. And it is still there, waiting to be read by anyone who knows how to look. The Department of Mystery still holds those files. They are locked in a vault that requires authorization from the minister himself. But rumors persist that the files are incomplete, that someone, perhaps a descendant of the keepers, has been quietly removing pages, editing the record, preparing for something. What that something is, we do not yet know, but we can guess. The ancient magic is not gone. It is not destroyed. It is only sleeping. And the Ministry's cover-up, however thorough, is only a temporary measure. The truth has a way of rising to the surface. In the next chapter, we will explore the primal forces that underpin this ancient magic, the elements that the keepers learned to harness, the raw, untamed power of the world itself. We will ask the question that the Ministry has spent over a century trying to suppress. What happens when the ancient magic wakes up? The Ministry's cover-up was thorough, systematic, and almost successful. They scoured the archives, seized artifacts, and buried the records of the 1890s anomaly so deep that even most Department of Mysteries employees today would struggle to find them. But what they could not erase were the scars left on the land itself. Because ancient magic, when it is used on a grand scale, does not simply vanish. It reshapes the world around it, and those changes are permanent. You see, the keepers understood something that the Ministry, in its fear, chose to ignore. Ancient magic is not a tool you wield. It is a force you negotiate with. And nowhere is that more evident than in its relationship with the primal elements, the weather, the earth, the very fabric of the physical world. These are not passive backdrops to ancient magic. They are its preferred instruments. Consider the storms. In the highlands surrounding Hogwarts, there are records of weather patterns that defy all known meteorological logic. Sudden, localized tempests that appear without warning, rain that falls in sheets over a single valley, while the next field over remains dry. The Ministry's official explanation, of course, is that these are natural phenomena, perhaps caused by the unique geography of the region. But those who have studied the traces know better. These storms are echoes. They are the residual effects of ancient magic that once commanded the sky itself. How does one control the weather with ancient magic? It is not a matter of casting a spell like the ones you learn in a classroom. There is no incantation for lightning, no wand movement for hail. Instead, it is about understanding that the atmosphere is alive, with its own kind of awareness. The ancient practitioners did not force the wind to obey them. They asked it. They spoke to the air in a language older than human speech, and the air responded. A storm in this context is not a weapon. It is a conversation that has gone very, very wrong. And then there is the earth. This is where the true terror lies. Because while controlling the weather is impressive, it is also fleeting. A storm passes. The sky clears. But the earth remembers. Ancient magic that moves the ground, that reshapes the stone, that tears open the bedrock. This leaves marks that last for millennia. The keepers knew this, which is why they were so cautious about using such power, but they also knew that sometimes there is no other choice. This brings us to what players of Hogwarts Legacy came to know as the Ancient Magic Throw. It is a deceptively simple ability. You reach out with your mind, you grab a nearby object, and you hurl it at your enemy with tremendous force. But the mechanics behind that action are anything but simple, because you are not using Levioso, you are not using Accio, you are not using any spell that a student would learn in their 5th year. Instead, you are reaching directly into the fabric of reality and telling a piece of the world to move. No wand, no incantation, just pure raw will. The physics of this are fascinating and frankly terrifying. When you cast a spell like Wingardium Leviosa, you're applying a controlled, limited force to an object. The spell creates a field of energy around the target, lifting it gently and moving it according to your direction. It is precise. It is safe. It is in many ways a compromise between the wizard and the world. But the Ancient Magic Throw is not a compromise. It is a command. You are not lifting the object. You are severing its connection to the ground and then accelerating it to speeds that would shatter bone on impact. There is no gentleness here. There is only force. And that force comes from the earth itself. Because ancient magic does not draw power from the wizard's own reserves, the way a typical spell does. It draws power from the environment. The stone you throw is not just a projectile. It is a conduit. When you hurl it, you are releasing the stored energy that has been locked inside that rock for millions of years. The impact is not just physical, it is elemental. The object carries with it the memory of the mountain it came from, the weight of the tectonic forces that shaped it, the heat of the planet's core, and when it strikes, all of that history is unleashed in a single devastating moment. Now, imagine what happens when the object you throw is not a small boulder but the ground itself. This is where the scale of destruction becomes almost incomprehensible, because ancient magic can do more than move objects. It can move the terrain. It can cause the earth to rise up in great waves of stone, swallowing everything in their path. It can open chasms that swallow entire buildings. It can reshape the landscape so completely that maps become useless within minutes. The keepers had a name for this. They called it the unmaking, because when you use the earth as your weapon, you are not just attacking your enemy. You are unmaking the world around them. You are tearing apart the foundation upon which all life depends. And once that foundation is broken, it cannot be easily repaired. The scars left by such magic are not just physical, they are magical. The land itself becomes unstable, prone to eruptions of raw energy, haunted by the echoes of what was done to it. This is why the Ministry was so desperate to bury the truth, because they knew that the 1890s anomaly was not an isolated incident. It was a warning. The protagonist of that era, the one who could see the blue traces, had access to this power, and they used it. They used it to defend Hogwarts, to fight the Goblin Rebellion, to seal away ancient evils. But every time they used it, they left a mark. Every time they threw a boulder or summoned a storm, they weakened the barrier between the world as we know it, and the raw, untamed magic that lies beneath. And that magic is still there. It is waiting. It is patient. It does not forget. The storms that rage over the highlands, the strange tremors that shake the Forbidden Forest, the inexplicable warmth that sometimes rises from the ground beneath the castle. These are not random events. They are the land remembering what was done to it. They are the primal elements, stirring in their sleep. The question is, what happens when they wake up? What happens when the earth decides to answer the call? that was made over a century ago. The keepers believed that the ancient magic could be contained, that the traces could be sealed, that the danger could be managed. But the ministry's cover-up suggests they knew better. They knew that the power was never truly controlled. It was only postponed. And that brings us to something even more unsettling, because the ancient magic that moves the earth and commands the sky is not the only primordial force lurking beneath the surface of the wizarding world. There is another power, older still, that has its own plans, a power that the keepers themselves may have been trying to protect us from, a power that in the end may have more to do with the Philosopher's Stone than anyone ever suspected. We have seen how ancient magic can command the weather, tear stone from the earth, and hurl objects across a room without a single spoken word. It is a force that bends the fundamental elements to its will. But if this power is so vast, so primal, why does it seem to have vanished from the world of modern wizardry? The answer may lie not in a lost spell or a forgotten wand movement, but in a single desperate attempt to bottle its essence. We are talking, of course, about the Philosopher's Stone. Nicolas Flamel is celebrated as the only known creator of the Philosopher's Stone, a man who achieved the two great prizes of alchemy, immortality and limitless wealth. But what if his work was not an original discovery, but a reconstruction? What if the stone was a modern wizard's attempt to reverse engineer a much older, much darker source of power? Consider the stone's most famous property, the elixir of life. It grants the drinker a suspended existence, a life force that does not fade. Now compare that to the reservoirs of ancient magic we have discussed. These are not just pockets of energy, they are concentrations of raw life, the very essence of the world's magic, pooled and waiting. The elixir of life is not a potion in the traditional sense. It is a diluted, stabilized form of that same primordial life force, siphoned from the earth and made drinkable. Flamel's genius, then, was not in creating something new, but in finding a way to contain and purify a force that was never meant to be held. The stone acts as a filter, a crucible that takes the chaotic, untamed energy of ancient magic and refines it into something a human body can tolerate. But this refinement comes at a cost. The stone is a limiter, just like the wand. It takes the raw elemental power of the world and reduces it to a manageable trickle. It is a pale imitation of the real thing, a shadow of the power that the keepers once wielded and feared. This brings us to the most chilling question of all. If the stone was a successful replication of ancient magic's life-giving properties, why was it destroyed? The official story is that Flamel, having lived for over 600 years, was ready to die. He had enough elixir to set his affairs in order. And then he allowed the stone to be destroyed to prevent it from falling into Voldemort's hands. But there is another layer to this decision, one that is rarely spoken of. The stone was not just a source of immortality, it was a key that, if misused, could unlock the very reservoirs of ancient magic that the keepers had sealed away. Think about what the stone represents. It is a manufactured conduit to the same life force that flows through the ancient magic hotspots. In the wrong hands, it could be used not just to drink the elixir, but to draw directly from those reservoirs. It could amplify a wizard's power to a catastrophic degree, pulling the raw magic of the earth into a single point. This is the primordial greed that the keepers feared. Not the greed for gold or power, but the greed for the very source of life itself. The stone was a temptation, a promise of infinite power that could never be satisfied. To keep it in existence was to leave a door open, a door that someone someday would try to walk through. Flamel's decision to destroy the stone was not just an act of personal surrender, it was an act of containment. He understood that his creation was a shadow of a much older magic, and that shadow, if pursued too far, could lead to the unmaking of everything. He chose to close the door, to sever the link between modern alchemy and the primal forces that the keepers had locked away. He chose to let the secret die with him. But the question remains, did he destroy all of it? The stone itself was gone, but what of the knowledge? What of the notes, the formulas, the the research that led to its creation? Could there be a copy, hidden in some forgotten vault, waiting to be found? And if so, what would happen if a new alchemist, one without Flamel's wisdom, attempted to recreate the stone? They might succeed in tapping into the ancient reservoirs, but they would not know how to control the flow. They would be like a child playing with a dam, unaware that the pressure building behind it could sweep away everything. This is the dark truth of the Philosopher's Stone. It was not a triumph of alchemy. It was a warning that some doors are best left sealed, and that the greatest magic is not the power to create, but the wisdom to know when to destroy. The stone's destruction was not the end of a story. It was the closing of a chapter that began with the keepers and their desperate attempt to hide the truth. And now, as we look toward the future, we must ask ourselves, what happens when the next chapter begins? What happens when someone decides to open that door again? The answer lies in a future that is already written, a future that we will explore next in chapter 27, the future of the past. We ended the last chapter with the Philosopher's Stone, and the question of whether Nicolas Flamel had stumbled upon something far older than alchemy. If the elixir of life was a pale echo of the life force held in ancient reservoirs, then what does that mean for the world we live in now? The stone was destroyed in 1992, but the reservoirs were never truly drained. They were sealed, buried, forgotten, and that is where the story takes a turn that feels almost like a warning. Ancient magic, as we have discussed, is not a spell you learn. It is not a charm you practice until you perfect the wrist movement. It is a force that exists independently of the wizard, a current running beneath the surface of reality. The keepers of Hogwarts' legacy understood this. They knew that the traces left behind by ancient magic could linger for centuries, and that those traces were not always benign. They built repositories, containment chambers, places where the energy could sleep. But sleep is not death. Now consider the 21st century. We live in a world saturated with electromagnetic fields, wireless signals, satellite transmissions. Every inch of the planet is crisscrossed by frequencies that our ancestors could never have imagined. And here is the uncomfortable possibility. What if those frequencies are not invisible to ancient magic? What if the hum of a cell tower, the pulse of a Wi-Fi router, the constant chatter of radio waves is exactly the kind of stimulus that could wake something that has been dormant for 1,000 years? The blue traces that the protagonist of Hogwarts' legacy could see were described as smoke-like, swirling, almost alive. They were visual evidence of a force that normally operates below human perception. But in the modern world, perception is not limited to the human eye. We have instruments that can detect magnetic anomalies, gravitational fluctuations, thermal signatures. We have built a global network of sensors that monitor everything from seismic activity to atmospheric pressure. If ancient magic leaves any physical trace at all, even a faint one, we might already be recording it without knowing what we are seeing. There is a reason the Ministry of Magic worked so hard to bury the events of the 1890s. They did not just destroy artifacts, they rewrote records, they silenced witnesses. They made sure that the story of the last known ancient magic user faded into rumor and legend, that they could not destroy the reservoirs themselves. Those were tied to the land, to the fountains of Hogwarts, to places far beyond the castle walls. And reservoirs, by their very nature, are not static. They empty. They respond to pressure. The warning signs are subtle, but they are there. Strange weather patterns that cannot be explained by climate models. Electrical failures in buildings with no obvious cause. Reports of people seeing things out of the corner of their eye. A flicker of blue light that vanishes when they turn their head. These are the kinds of anomalies that muggles dismiss as glitches in the Matrix, and that wizards attribute to stray magical activity from the ordinary world. But what if they are something else? What if they are the first trickles of a reservoir that is filling up once again? Think about the conditions that triggered ancient magic in the past. It was not activated by a wand movement or a spoken incantation. It was activated by emotion, by sacrifice, by moments of extreme psychological or physical pressure. The modern world is a pressure cooker. We are more connected than ever, but also more isolated. We carry devices that amplify our thoughts and feelings into digital signals that travel at the speed of light. Is it so far-fetched to imagine that a concentrated surge of human emotion, grief, rage, love, despair, could interact with an ancient magical trace in a way that neither wizards nor muggles have anticipated? The keepers believed that ancient magic was best left undisturbed. They built their vaults and their trials not to protect the magic from the world, but to protect the world from the magic. They knew that the power was not inherently evil, but that it was indifferent. It did not care about the consequences of its use. It simply was. And when a force that powerful is awakened, it does not ask permission. There is a theory, discussed in the margins of old texts and in the whispered conversations of those who study the obscure, that the reservoirs are not just containers. They are living things. They breathe, they pulse, they respond to the state of the world around them. If that is true, then the 21st century might be the most dangerous time in history for them to stir. Our technology is fragile. Our infrastructure is interdependent. A single electromagnetic pulse, whether natural or magical, could cripple a city. And if ancient magic decided to express itself through the networks we have built, the result would be chaos. But it might not be destructive. It might be something stranger. Imagine a world where ancient magic and modern technology merge, not in conflict, but in symbiosis, where the blue traces become visible not just to the rare few, but to everyone, through the screens we carry in our pockets, where the whispers that the keepers heard become data streams that we can analyze. That is a future that no one has prepared for, because no one has dared to consider it. The ministry's cover-up was effective for a century, but secrets have a half-life. Eventually, the truth leaks out, and the truth is that ancient magic never went away. It just went to sleep. And now, in the glow of our digital world, the reservoirs are showing signs of waking. We have seen the fragments, the unexplained phenomena, the stories that surface and are quickly dismissed. But if you know where to look, the pattern is unmistakable. Something is building. Something is pressing against the barriers that the keepers erected. And when those barriers finally break, the past will not stay in the past. It will become the future. That is the dark truth that the keepers understood, and that the ministry tried to hide. Ancient magic is not a relic of a bygone age. It is a force that exists outside of time, and time, as we are about to discover, is running out. In the next chapter, we will pull back the final curtain. We will examine what happens when the reservoirs overflow, when the traces become floods, when the magic that was never meant to be controlled finally breaks free. That chapter is called The Final Truth, and it will change everything you thought you knew about the foundations of magic itself. And so we arrive at the final truth. We have traced the blue smoke through the halls of Hogwarts, through the archives of the ministry, through the bloodlines of the rare few who could see it. We have watched as the keepers sealed their knowledge away, as the Department of Mysteries scrubbed the records, as the modern wizarding world forgot what it once knew. But forgetting does not mean disappearance. It only means the truth waits, buried, for someone to dig it up again. The possibility that ancient magic might wake up in the 21st century is not a fantasy. It is a geological inevitability. Think of it like a dormant volcano. The pressure builds beneath the surface for centuries. And then, without warning, the ground cracks open. In the late 1800s, the protagonist of Hogwarts' legacy tapped into that pressure. They saw the blue traces. They wielded the power. They made choices that reshaped the magical landscape of the Scottish Highlands. But they were not the first, and they will not be the last. The question is not whether ancient magic will stir again. The question is what will happen when it does. Modern technology, for all its brilliance, is not equipped to handle what ancient magic leaves behind. We have seen this in the traces that linger around old battlefields, around the sites of the Keeper's trials, around the reservoirs of power that pulse beneath the castle. Those traces are not inert. They are like electrical charge, waiting for a conductor. And in the 21st century, we have built a world of conductors. Every phone, every satellite, every fiber optic cable is a potential antenna for a force we do not understand. Imagine a power surge that does not blow a fuse, but instead opens a door that should have stayed shut. This is the dark reality that the Keepers understood and that the Ministry tried to bury. Magic is not a gift. It is not a tool. It is not a birthright. Magic is a volatile natural resource, as raw and as dangerous as the magma that flows beneath the Earth's crust. The wizarding world treats it like a classroom subject, like a skill to be graded and refined. But ancient magic is not something you learn. It is something you survive. It is the primordial force that existed before the first wand was carved, before the first incantation was spoken, before the first wizard realized they could bend the world to their will. And like any force of nature, it does not care about your intentions. The ultimate fate of those who seek to master the world's foundations is not glory. It is not immortality. It is not even power. It is absorption. They become part of the magic they try to control. The Keepers understood this. They did not destroy the ancient magic because they could not. They contained it, and they paid the price. Their memories, their identities, their very souls were woven into the reservoirs they guarded. They became the traces. They became the blue smoke. They became the whispers that only the sensitive can hear. And that is the truth that the Ministry's cover-up was designed to hide. It was not just about protecting the public from a dangerous weapon. It was about protecting the public from the knowledge that magic is not a servant, it is a master. And every wizard who casts a spell is only borrowing from a debt that will eventually come due. The ancient magic users of the past did not die. They were consumed. Their power did not vanish. It was recycled, fed back into the earth, waiting for the next fool to dig too deep. So why are some secrets better left buried beneath Hogwarts? Because the castle is not just a school. It is a lid. It is a capstone placed over a well that leads straight down to the foundations of reality. The founders knew this. They built the school not to educate, but to contain. Every classroom, every corridor, every moving staircase is part of a vast magical seal designed to keep the pressure from breaking the surface. And for 1,000 years, it has worked. But seals can crack. Pressure can find new paths. And when the blue smoke starts to rise again, as it did in the 1890s, as it will again in the future, the question is not whether we are ready. The question is whether we will recognize the danger before it is too late. The traces are still there. They are in the walls of the castle. They are in the forest. They are in the lake. They are in the very air around the forbidden section of the library. And they are waiting, not for a hero, not for a chosen one. They are waiting for someone who is willing to listen, to see, to understand that the power they seek is not a gift to be claimed, but a force to be respected. The Keepers learned that lesson. The protagonist of Hogwarts' legacy learned it too, in their own way. And now, as we close this chapter, you have learned it as well. The final truth is this: ancient magic is not a secret to be uncovered. It is a warning to be heeded. The blue traces are not a path to power. They are a map of the places where the world has already broken. And the only way to survive the encounter is to remember that you are not the master. You are the visitor. You are the guest. And if you stay too long, you will not leave the same way you arrived. So let the secrets stay buried. Let the reservoirs remain sealed. Let the blue smoke drift unseen through the oldest stones of Hogwarts. Because some truths are not meant to be spoken aloud, and some magic is better left as a whisper in the dark, a story told by the fire, a mystery that never finds its answer. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If you have been listening each night, you've walked through the halls of a truth that most will never see. And now, As the fire burns low and the shadows settle, let the weight of that knowledge settle with you. Rest easy, knowing that the magic of Hogwarts is still there, still waiting, still watching, and that is exactly where it belongs. What did you think of this journey? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this changed your perspective or taught you something new, consider subscribing for more mind-expanding content. And if you know someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, share it with them. These are the kind of conversations that matter.